Hello, hello, welcome one and all. It looks like we're live. Sound levels look good. Thank you for joining us once again at 2.5 Talent here in 2025 with our special guest. We've got Elfish Guy jumping in. Paladin's not yet home from his Christmas break, but we wanted to get an episode out. So we thought with quite a few changes happening, and especially some of them being over in the APAC region, why not bring in the resident APAC man himself? So Jordan, to kickstart things, first of all, how you doing? Thank you for joining us. And yeah, how was your Christmas?
Christmas was good. It's actually lasted for like 3 weeks because my family are all cooked. We had a
Right.
Christmas Day celebration like on the 21st, so it kind of started on the 21st of December.
Sure.
Then we had obviously Christmas Day itself, and also because I'm part German, we celebrate Christmas on Christmas Eve as well. And then my grandma got sick, so we couldn't do that. So then we actually had Christmas Day yesterday as well. So actually, it's been a 2-3 week thing. So it's been good. It's been nice. But to kickstart, as you say, it's kickstarting my Saturday actually today. It's 7 a.m. right now. So if I look a little bit cooked, look at these puffy eyes, mate. This is what you've done to me. So yeah, thanks for that. Also, on top of my head, it says Paladin. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but
No, yeah, it does say Paladin. I can't change the graphics. I don't have the what's it called, Photoshop file. So unlucky. You're gonna have to be Paladin
unlucky.
today.
I'll take it.
Yeah, I at least got your at there below you. But yeah, I can't change the Photoshop file because I don't have it. So it's as simple as that. Trav, how we doing? How was Christmas? What have we been up to?
Well, we had a nice time being sick in bed for most of it.
True.
But yeah, I think we went to a football game together after seeing some friends, and I think there was a guy behind us that infected both of us.
Yeah,
And
fucked us up real bad.
I think he got me worse than he got you, even though you were pretty bad as well.
Yeah.
I was in bed for like 2 days. I ate Christmas separate from my parents because I didn't want to infect them. So like I was at a little
no.
table separate from my parents. So yeah, and then the next few days after that, I felt absolutely terrible. But I've recovered now, and overall, it's been fun. I basically, other than being sick, I could just lie in bed and read about all the roster moves all day and play Balatro because I'm addicted to that game
It's
now.
so sick, isn't it? I've been trying to get people to play it because people don't understand how good it is. It's worth getting. It's also
I have it on my phone
it's
and on
mobile.
Steam.
Yeah,
right
I'm
now.
gonna say it's very good on mobile. That's a game I actually need to get for the phone because that is like a plain game right there. Like
It is.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, my side was good. Didn't really do all too much. Went away for a few days with the family, but like kind of Trav mentioned, I was ill as shit basically. Some guy was like coughing and sneezing a storm behind us at the West Ham game. So yeah, we got fucked up. What can you do? But apart from that, it was pretty nice. Didn't do all too much, and obviously I had my birthday 3 days after Christmas, so that was pretty good as well. Kind of back to back. This Christmas period is always quite good for me. It's like Christmas, 3 day break, birthday, 3 day break, New Year's, and it's always pretty good. So it's always like quite a full on period. So early Jan is always a nice little calm down, i.e. recover from the hangover. So yeah, it's been alright, not too bad. But let's kickstart things as we always do, talking about what has been going on. And in particular, what has mainly been going on is Rostermania. That's what we're all talking about. So we can kind of jump in towards that. We've got the Rostermania tracker from HSTV up here, and there is a shit ton to go through in all fairness. So we're not going to go through all of them, obviously, because most of them are about people that we just do not care about. But there is some that are worthwhile. And yeah, so we're going to touch on them, and kind of fittingly, the first ones here are from Asia, and with our APAC representative, I thought we could start there. So we've got Starry returning to Linvision, which we can also touch on, and then the Alistair one too, which you can come back to in a minute. Let's start with Starry. Jordan, the Tally project has very quickly become the super team into the not so super team, as Jam Young's gone to Valorant, Starry's back to Linvision after about 10 days in the team.
Yeah. Well, actually, I mean, funny that you mentioned Jam Young because the last rumor I heard, which is coming from last night, is that Jam Young might actually be back on Tyloo, but I don't know if that's going to be confirmed or anything like that.
As we heard while we were out in China. He failed his
exactly.
trial.
But we'll see what happens when we get to Extreme Zone, which is in like 10 days. Tyloo's going to be playing there, so maybe Jam Young will be there. I don't know. Anyway, look, I mean, I haven't actually had the chance to talk about this Starry change for Linvision just yet because all the podcasts have been down over the Christmas and New Year period. So I don't know. I mean, for people who maybe haven't really caught up with this or been keeping up with it, I did make a tweet about it, and it was a little bit silly. Obviously, the whole situation. Linvision initially basically allowed Starry to go to Tyloo. They didn't actually have to pay for him because he was at the end of his contract. So Tyloo basically got Linvision for free. He spent I would say what, about maybe 6 months, maybe not even that, on Tai Lu.
Yeah.
And then Tai Lu have then sold him back to Linvision for something like $95,000 because for whatever reason he doesn't actually want to play
Not
on
even
Tai Lu.
August to
So
December, not even 6 months.
Oh,
yeah,
God.
not even 6 months, about 4 months. Yeah, I mean
Oh,
it's just a
wow.
whole shit show really. But I don't know. The weird thing is like it makes Tai Lu just look like, first of all, Tai Lu doesn't actually have a team confirmed at this point, which is very strange. Orman's playing as like a stand-in substitute type situation. I can't imagine that's going to be a long-term thing. Lin
Yeah.
Vision's starting to potentially look like a little bit more of a super team now. Again, with Zach obviously on the AWP, you're getting Starry back in, who's one of the better riflers in China at the moment. So Tai Lu was supposed to be the super team, like you say. That project kind of died in a fire. I don't even know if it's going to come back from the ashes, but maybe if Jamyang comes back and they find a suitable replacement for Orman, I could still see something there. But yeah, it's silly.
Yeah. Trav, I don't know if you've kind of caught much of this, but it is pretty stupid. I mean, there was a figure flying around. I sort of know it, but I don't know if it was public. I think someone replied to your tweet. I think it was Jordan, if I'm right in saying
680,000 RMB it was,
which is like 90,
which is 95,000.
Yes,
US.
right. So I mean, fair play to Tai Lu. That's kind of quite funny business in a way. It's like, you guys have got a guy on a free and then just made 95K 4 months later. Like, as a businessman, that's not bad, right? That's printing.
That's Tai Lu in a nutshell, though, bro.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
they've always had that like killer instinct. You know how they've got like 10 players on their bench. It's for this exact reason.
Exactly, and I can kind of fucking respect it. It's pretty sick. However, like you said, Tai Lu's in a really weird position because you got Orman, who's basically a sub, who's now standing in. Jamyang, let's say he finishes off this 5. It's Orman, G, Mercury, Mosea, and Jamyang. Now, it's still actually a pretty good team, right? Mosea, Mercury, Jamyang is super solid for me. I think G, a little bit of a step down, but generally speaking, still actually a very, very solid player in my books. Orman, of course, you can kind of take your whatever with that, right? But it's still not a bad team. But it's just the fact that, I think for me at the very least, the annoying thing about this Tai Lu team is that when we had Starry in this lineup, it was like the super team, right? This was the team that was meant to be maybe the best Chinese team we've seen in a long, long time. Like, it had all the right makings to be. It was kind of the best players in nearly every position. So it was sort of perfect in that sense. And it never really even got a chance to really showcase itself. They obviously had the RMR, which was unfortunate for them, didn't work out. And they kind of should have had that guaranteed spot anyway, and they didn't because Linvision got it, but it was a little bit weird because just how the rankings worked out. So they kind of had like one real tournament, and then the other one they played. What was it? The ESL. What was it called?
The Challenger Finals.
The LAN. Yeah, and they won, right? So it's like sick. You've had your run out, you've done well, and then you break up immediately. So for me, it's kind of just frustrating, really, with this Tai Lu thing because. It's kind of I think it always will be the what if, you know what I mean?
100%. I mean, I think it took a long time for them to like finally get a roster that we were actually excited about. Because if you remember, Nao, like when you first came on my podcast, that was probably like 2 years, probably 2 years ago now, or maybe a year and a half, something like that. And that was when we were talking about that score, like. I can't even remember who was on that roster apart from Score, and Letney was coaching it. It was just like the wildest Tai Lu roster you've ever seen. It was like Score and a couple of
Emmy and Roger.
Emmy and Roger and I can't, maybe was Danking on the roster still at the time? I can't remember, but it was just ridiculous. It was like some stupid, ridiculous roster when every Chinese team was playing with an international roster, and from that point for whatever it was, for like another like what it might have been 12 months or so, or even potentially longer. Like, we didn't give a shit about Tai Lu because, they just didn't put together a decent roster. Then we started to kind of get the makings of this decent roster starting in 2024. Obviously, we're now 25. And even then, it was kind of like, okay, well, we know this roster is coming because we're kind of like, okay, we know G's coming. We know Starry's coming. We've sort of heard these rumors. But that took like 6 months to happen. And so for that 6 months in ESL Challenger League, we were watching fucking Cami and Advent and... Zedia and Lyrics. Do you remember this Lyrics bloke? Like, come on, man. Like,
out of nowhere.
It was just shocking. And it was like, we're literally in like, we're all in Tai Lu prison, like watching and waiting and hoping for them to put together finally this decent team. We wait for like 6 months. I saw this, by the way, back in Australia as well, before Beckside ended up joining FlyQuest / Greyhound at the time. he was in a team called the Chiefs, and he was too young to play. He was like 15, I think, and you had to be 16 to play in things like ANZ champs, Nat champs, and so basically this Chiefs team died because he was sitting on the bench. They were waiting for him, and they were playing with a stand-in. I think their coach at the time was Yam, and he was playing for the Chiefs, and they like it was the same thing. They were like waiting for this team to be put together for so long, and then pretty much as soon as he was actually of age to play, and in this case for Tyloo, pretty much as soon as they got to play with their roster, it just like fucking broke up. And it was like, what did we even wait for? What was the point? Literally, why did we wait 6 months for Tyloo to put this roster together only for it to die? It's so disappointing. And now, yeah, as you say, it's like a case of what if? Like, what if Lin Vision wouldn't have got that invite and there would have been 2 Chinese qualifiers to the RMR? What if Tyloo would have got the qualification to the RMR instead, which they should have because they were better at the time than Lin Vision? But ESL Challenger League wasn't calculated on the Valve ranking system. So I don't know what to say, really. I'm just, it sucks, but I think Tyloo can still put together a decent team. I think Lin Vision can still put together a decent team, and I have to hope that that'll be the case, especially with Rare Atom looking kind of okay at the moment in China. We could still have 3 decent Chinese teams out of all of this, but Tyloo's going to have to find a diamond in the rough somewhere. I don't know if ZDR necessarily is that. Like, if they just port Orman in for ZDR and have Jamyoung in there, I don't know that that necessarily solves any of the issues for Tyloo, because I think the one critique you could have had for them was that they didn't have a strong in-game leadership presence in that, like, quote-unquote super team. Now, though, where are they going to get that from? Maybe it's Orman, but realistically speaking, he's never been, like, an IGL figure in the past, so I don't really see it, like, working on the outset unless they find a really good pickup somewhere.
Trav, what I'm hearing here is it might be time to bring Advent back.
That's the thing that's so hilarious, right? Like, Jordan's like eloquently, articulated that point really well of just like, we were waiting for so long for Tyloo to get something together. We coped through all those different iterations that were basically complete bullshit. And now we've reached the point of, well, is it even going to still exist anymore? What's Jamyoung doing? Is he going to Valorant, does that even make any sense? Does he even have any in? Yeah, I mean, but does he have any in to the Chinese Valorant scene at all? I don't even know. It makes zero sense to me when he could be on one of the best Chinese teams.
I think Tyloo have I think they have a Valorant team, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, well,
they do, but he's not in on it, obviously. From
my
understanding, he was trialing for different Valorant teams than the Tyloo Valorant team. Like, it wasn't just a direct port across, which is what happened for, if you remember, Slowly. Slowly might have been one of the players in that team we were talking about now. Slowly went from Tyloo CS to Tyloo Valorant, but I don't believe that's what the case was for Jamyoung. Either way, he didn't make it, so GG.
And it would annoy me so much even if he did, because, like, he was spoken about alongside Mercury and Mazeo as like that trio, that core that was going to be the future of Tyloo for like what, 3-4 years in the future, because they were young, talented, always showed decent some upset performances on LAN, and basically the only upset performance Tyloo have kind of had on LAN in the entirety of 2024 was like a map against a dead Falcons, if you remember, when they had Advent and ZDR playing. So that was in Pro League, I believe. I think I did that one, which was well, I'll always remember because it was so funny.
God.
So yeah, it's like, you want to see them do well, because you wouldn't say, looking at the teams, looking at Rare Atom, like, sure, they have all the experience on that team, but why is Rare Atom the team at the Shanghai Major? It shouldn't have been. It's cool for those like that core of 3 players that have been plying their trade in Asia for God knows how long to get the opportunity to play a major in Shanghai. It's amazing, don't get me wrong, but it's like, it shouldn't have been them. Simple as that.
Especially with, like, it's cool to see like Zyme got his like last little kind of run of things before obviously going off to military service, which he's now like kind of committed to, and he might not come back. If he does come back, it's probably too late at this point. But I think the big thing for me, and kind of come and touching on the point that Jordan was bringing up, we've got Rare Atom, Lin Vision, and Tyloo, which is sick, right? We've got 3 different decent Chinese teams. However, the annoying thing for me, it's 3 different decent Chinese teams rather than 1 super team, which is the annoying thing. It really felt like we actually had the potential of having like a full Chinese super team, which has the ability to actually maybe even compete. Granted, it's not going to get to the level of Mongols, but it could actually be like that second seed behind them in all these Asian qualifiers, where we could have a team that internationally, at least it will be one of those teams for me, at least. When I saw them on paper, it felt like a team that, you know, we've kind of, I know this is a joke that we always make of don't put the Asian teams 0-3, right? But this would be like the first proper Asian team bar the Mongols who like go in, or the first team like that's kind of like from China or that basically that isn't the Mongols essentially, that goes into them and you could be like, you cannot put these guys 0-3. There's no way. They're way too good on paper, right? But at least with like Rare Atom and like any of these teams, you could so easily make arguments, and like the average person would put them 0-3, like a Rare Atom, who most people did obviously in this sense. Vision would have been the same, right? This is the thing. They're always for me like, you know, classic, you know, compared to EU teams or like, you know, the lower end of the EU teams. I back the EU teams every day of the week. However, this Tyloo team felt like the first one in a while where it's like on paper, like actually no, you got like a really strong fragging IGL. You've got an insane core around it with like, in my opinion, one of the best support players in the region, right? You've got obviously a young kind of audacious fragger in Mercury who obviously kind of like didn't like Advent's calling, so that's kind of why he got benched, or one of the rumors of why he got benched. But, you know, super confident player who you kind of love in that sense. G, who I think is actually a very solid AWPer. I mean, there's arguments say he's maybe not the best AWPer anymore from the region, but still very solid in my life. There's a lot to like. And now it's like, it's still good, but it's not 100%. And that's the annoying thing for me. Again, it comes back to this like, what if? It's like 3 teams at 75% rather than 1 team at 100%.
Yeah, I mean, I think the sad thing about Tyloo, I guess, to wrap up the discussion on them, is that they were, and sort of tying it back to what you said about the Mongols, they were kind of like that team where you could, in a world, sort of make the argument, oh, maybe these guys will be not the next Mongols necessarily, but they'll actually be like the Chinese equivalent of the Mongols and the FlyQuest. Like, you would then have the top 3 of Oceania, Mongolia, and China at least represented by like their quote unquote top team. And the theory was that Tyloo could, if any Chinese team was going to do it, emulate somewhat similar of a run to what the Mongols have done by putting together the talent and building a team that might actually be able to compete internationally. But again, like you say, we're back to kind of that square one for Chinese CS. Although again, like there is talent floating around definitely, and even going down to like a 4th team, you know, this Fated Rise roster, which is the former Cat Evil, they're kind of looking okay at the moment. But yeah, it's just, is there a team you can really look at and say, they're definitely the best team in China right now? I think the answer is no, pending obviously the Vision and Tyloo rosters getting confirmed, but neither of them are looking like they're the go-to yet.
Exactly. Let's move on to the next one. This one is got conversations, kind of ace inputs more so from both of us, as we all know about kind of this one, which is the FlyQuest one, right? We got minus Alistair. Let's just put it out there for the one time, finally, and plus Regali, which I want to start with your opinion first. Me and Trevor have already given our opinions to each other kind of like in DMs, but Jordan, what is your thought on minus Alistair plus Regali?
I mean, I'll start with minus Alistair to begin with. And I think I'll probably be going against the grain a little bit in regards to this one. I'm sure you guys, like you said, you're like, fire it fucking finally. But for me, you know, I did see that uptick from Alistair over the last kind of couple of events that he played. I thought he was obviously really good at Atlanta, and you could have said, oh, is that a one-hit wonder? Is that a bit of a streaky kind of event? He's obviously liable to do that with the playstyle that he has or had in the previous sort of 3 to 5 years, I guess. But even at the major, I thought, as a general rule, he and FlyQuest actually looked a lot better. So for me, I probably would have given him another major cycle if it were me being the GM or, you know, in charge of the team, I guess. I think maybe there's part of that is because of the bias just involved, that I obviously like to see a full 5 Australian or ANZ core. They were just Australian at this case, but ANZ's, you know, kind of our region. So I would have liked to have probably seen another 6 months for Ali just because of that form uptick. But I don't know necessarily what the internal dichotomy of that team is. You know, had they already made that decision prior to the major? Had there been conversations already? Was it kind of like locked in even around the Atlanta time, or the conversation had kind of been had? I don't really know. And I have had some sort of conversations with people involved in the team, and I've said as much to them that I was like, you know, I probably would have given them another 6 months, and they sort of were like, yeah, you know, that's fair enough. Like, that's not an unreasonable take at all. But obviously there's bigger changes that we kind of want to be making within the team, and it wasn't necessarily just based on, you know, he's like had an uptick in form, therefore we have to keep him kind of thing. It was like, we're actually going through a little bit more. So I was like, okay, fair enough. You know what I mean? Like, so I think it's one of those things where it's kind of just an unfortunate timing really for Ali, that maybe that little spurt came through a little bit too late to keep him in the team. If it were, you know, if it were like another 6 months prior, let's say 12 months ago, Perhaps it would have been someone else on the chopping block. I can't really say. I don't know. But yeah, I like Ali as a person. I like watching him as a player in particular as well. I think he's a really, really fun player to watch when he's on. Probably the most enjoyable Australian player, maybe outside of Ins, when like if we're talking at their peak, like Ali is a very, very flamboyant, kind of exciting, peaky, kind of like flicky, fast kind of AWPer when he's really hitting his shots. He has this fun style to watch. But yeah, I think they were looking for something different, obviously, in the long term. And that moves us then to Regali. And as to whether or not that's the change that they need, I think man for man, obviously, you'd probably look at that and say it's a quote unquote firepower upgrade. But I do wonder how it's going to change the system a lot for FlyQuest, because Alistair has been, I think, quite a central figure in the roster, again, without knowing necessarily too much the in-depth of how they work as a roster. I have heard a lot of things about how he is quite influential in that team in terms of their preparation and how he kind of sets up rounds. And obviously he's the kind of quote unquote hype man for that roster as well, although you do kind of see some of that from Vexite nowadays as well. Yeah, I just think it's a big change, I think, for FlyQuest, because Alistair's been with that core for a very long time. And we'll have to sort of see how Regali sort of fits in. But I think it's quite a risk for the signing that they have made. I will give it, obviously, the benefit of the doubt because, again, what is there to do at this point? We haven't seen him play. But yeah, I don't know. I personally would have liked to have seen Ali get another 6 months, but maybe I'm just a little bit Aussie biased.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because, like, if you look at previous games for Ali, you would say, okay, I was sort of most of the opinions are that it's kind of time. Like, even if you do give him another 6 months, like he's had his pop off, he's had his one incredible pop off like LAN final in an ESL Challenger event. Like, can he really make that next step up to the next level? There's an argument that Regali maybe can't either, which is, I guess, probably one of the things that people have been saying. If this was the Regali post Copenhagen Flames from like 2022, 2023, I would say this is like an absolutely banger move. I mean, he was probably the best player in Tier 2 by quite a long way when he was on Copenhagen Flames. He had his OG stint. It was a little bit wishy-washy. It wasn't anything too special. It was a little bit too defensive. It was kind of playing a bit head trick-esque from the NIP days, right? It was a little bit too static, I felt like, especially on T side. So he was very good on CT, but not T side. And then obviously went to Entropic, where he basically spent a couple of months and then rotted on the bench for a bit, which is obviously Entropic left Counter-Strike, thinking that chances of being able to make a major was not going to happen, which is probably likely. So, it's hard to gauge where his form actually is, which is the main problem. Like, he's not played as many officials as you kind of would have hoped in sort of near, at a level you'd want to see FlyQuest at. They're going to be at Blast Bounty. That's going to be a big test for Regali in terms of, sure, he's played that level with OG a little bit, but time has passed at this point, right? So I've always been a big enjoyer of Regali. Liked him, as I said, especially in that Copenhagen Flames era. I think he was very flashy when he was on the Bird from Sky. But we know the history. I know it's a bit of a history that maybe is a bit of a fake one at this point. But AWPers don't necessarily always shine under Dexter, just stats-wise. So we're going to have to give him the benefit of the doubt for now, like Jordan says. But I do wonder, long-term, if they might pivot in like a year from now already.
Okay, so what I'm leaning with this is, I think, obviously, in the same way that Jordan has his biases with Alistair, I have my bias either way. I like Regali a lot. I know the guy quite well. I speak to him quite regularly as well. I speak to him, I've been speaking to him recently, especially after the back of this move, but for the last year, I've been kind of keeping in contact and seeing sort of what he's been up to. This guy I've known, met in person a bunch of times. Lovely fella, right? First of all, I think this is, for me, a direct upgrade. I love Regali. I think he has the talent. I said this on Twitter in a response. I think it was to T-Time's tweet, I'm pretty sure. T-Time was pretty anti it. I'm very for it. And obviously, I'm more than happy to say it comes from a place of bias. However, I said, my point was, when he's been in a stable team, I think Regali is fantastic. The issue is that for the last year and a bit, he hasn't been in a stable team. He was in OG. That's gonna fucking kill you. OG is shit, right? It's always gonna kill you, right? It's a cursed team to join. Like any iteration of NIP, maybe bar the upcoming one, which we'll come to in a little bit, right? But any iteration of NIP's going to curse you. OG, sort of the same. It's like EG of the past, right? You're going to get fucked joining that team. You might get the bag, but it's not going to be good for the stats. And then he's in Entropic. Entropic, he joins them and they shut down like 3 months later. Like they completely close all esports, or at least all Counter-Strike. So again, right, it's two times where like it was just like not really his fault. Before that, when he played at the last, again, he was in Copenhagen Flames before they inevitably shut down. But when he was playing on Copenhagen Flames, he was easily the best AWPer in tier 2, undoubtedly. It wasn't even close. There was nobody even near him. This is a guy averaging like a 1.26 online on a consistent basis and destroying everybody. There was like nobody even close. So for me, Rogali has the ability to play at tier 1 level, in my opinion, and it's somebody that I actually finally think there's going to be at least some sort of consistency out from this team. The only issue, of course, being he's in EU while they're in Oz. However, I sort of know the semantics of sort of how it's going to play out. Basically, they're not going to scrim, of course. He's not moving out to Oz. He only has to actually go to Oz like 2 times a year for some sort of qualifiers, basically. I can't remember exactly what it is, but apparently he only needs to go to Oz like twice a year to play these quals. The rest of the time, he's basically going to be doing classic stuff, working his own game, whether that's FPL or whatever it is, and teamwork, which again, he doesn't need to like be there. He can obviously do it abroad, server work, basically. It's a lot harder, but you can't really scrim in Oz anyway. No offense, Jordan, but the rest of your teams are complete horseshit, so it's a waste of time. You know what I mean? So they wouldn't be pracking anyway. There's no one to scrim, right? Back home. Well, not really, right? So I think for me, this is an upgrade. I like Rogali a lot. I think he's very versatile. I think he's somebody who can also play with a rifle if he wants to. Granted, it doesn't happen that often, but he can do it. I think he's crisp. I think he's got a lot of potential. I just think he's always, in the last kind of year or a bit, he's kind of been fucked over by his last 3 teams, blowing up, and it's completely not his fault. He was just there, wrong place, wrong time, and all that shit. Flames blew up, stopped being an org altogether. Entropic, same thing, and OG's OG, right? So it's what it is. But I actually like this move a lot. I think it was inevitable. Alistair has a very distinct ceiling for me, and it's been there for ages. The minus Alistair thing has been a talking point for like so long now, and I think it's always a classic thing for me of where there's smoke, there's fire, and that was the case here. I just feel like it kind of felt like it was inevitable to happen, and every time it didn't happen,
until they got an option.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, a decent option.
Every time we would get to a break, it's like, right, they're finally gonna bite the bullet here and actually just go forward and get rid of him and upgrade. But then it was always the thing, and I remember saying this on Geographically Challenged with Jordan. I was saying, who do you actually get, right? And I said this, I think in the episode we did in China, because I've got a bit a track record here on Geographically Challenged. The 3 episodes, all 3 times I've called for one person to get kicked, and it's happened within like a week after. First was Advent, got kicked not too long after. Then was Alistair in the first episode we did in China. Second episode we did was Cater from Fnatic, and he also got kicked as well. So the track record's running pretty smooth here for Geographically Challenged. But what I said back then was, who did they actually pick up? Or did they go the same route as Talon and go EU with the AWPers, which I think is probably the way they're going. And that's what they've done here. So I like this. I think the move for Rogali is a good one. I think he's got a lot of talent. I think he's got more potential and a much higher ceiling than Alistair personally, especially playing in EU. The only thing for me is just how long is it going to take him to get up to speed with the team? How long is it going to take him to get up to speed with just team play as a whole? Because, he hasn't played actually in a team in a while. It's been a hot minute since he's actually been in a team playing and pracking regularly. He has just been kind of, grinding FPL and all the rest. All that you really can do is a kind of a teamless player. I think technically he was still under contract, so at least he's been salaried a bit, but it was, there was no team there from Entropic. He was just getting paid out the rest of his salary. But that's the thing for me. I think I like it a lot. I just think I'm worried about how long it's going to take him to get up to speed a little bit, just because he's been out of the game for a while, but I like it. I think it's an upgrade. I think the Alistair move, it was inevitable. It was going to happen sooner or rather later. I'm glad it's happened now. I think for me, the issue kind of, I guess in the counter to you, Jordan, is if you say it should be given another cycle, this, based off the back of like 1.5 tournaments, I don't think takes in the big picture. They've had incredibly underwhelming performances this year. Like a lot of not, I think they would have expected more, especially because they get guaranteed invites to big tournaments. They kind of go into big tournaments and not doing a lot. And I think for me, the issue is they actually think they can. I think with the talent they have, I think they can. I don't think Dex is a bad caller by any means. I think he's a fairly decent player. I think Inter's phenomenal. Inter easily could play in a top EU team, no bother. Part of me kind of wishes he would play in a top EU team, in all honesty. I think he may be slightly wasted. But I also think Vexite's very talented. So you're looking at, for me, what is it, 3 very solid players. Now you're getting a pretty solid AWPer who I think has the potential to be very solid. I like this team. I think it has more potential to have deeper runs, which is something that FlyQuest just haven't really done. Bar Challenger, but do you really count it? Because not the greatest of teams. It's not tier 1 tournament, not tier 1 level opposition. And it's also a tournament which they can't replicate because it's dead. So what can you do, right? That's the way I look at it. So I'm a big fan of this. I think Regali, for me, is a big plus.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to criticize really. Like, I think we all sort of saw that there was a change at some point, kind of coming for FlyQuest, and I suppose it did have to happen inevitably. We'll have to wait and see. I think it's an interesting one just because it raises a few more questions almost than it answers with regards to obviously the EU AU split. ESL Challenger Oceania is going to be a bit of a handful for them to figure out. I assume Regali will just have to stay in Oz for a few weeks, and they'll have to kind of bang out a few games over the course of those few weeks, and maybe forfeit 1 or 2, and just do enough to kind of make it into playoffs, and then play the playoffs run and kind of like win it from there. But other than that, like, there's not really anything to play in ANZ specifically for FlyQuest in particular. They're really only going to be back for those qualifiers, as you say. So if anything they don't get an invite to, which obviously going into this year, it's there will be more invites than there was qualifiers, I would say. So I mean, it could definitely work for FlyQuest, but we'll just have to wait and see. I will say though, in the case of like Talon, for example, we heard a lot about MHL and how he's going to like really dominate Asia and stuff like that at the RMR, and I was kind of like, I was just whelmed. You know what I mean? I wasn't underwhelmed necessarily by it, but I was like whelmed. I was neutral on it. I was like, he was fine.
True.
And I'm kind of just hoping that that's not going to be the case here for Regali as well, where we're like, okay, well, we hear a lot about like, oh, this guy's a sick EU AWPer tier 2. He's going to like come in and do awesome stuff. And that's what everyone said about MHL. And then it was like, it was all right, but like,
I mean, I would still say MHL is like clearly Talon's best player.
No way, bro. Netic farmed the RMR.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, I'm talking about like the RMR specifically. Netic was incredible, but like their EU
only tournament they played, bro.
They played the EU tournaments. I did like their first 5 games, and it was all MHL. Like, no offense, those Aussie boys were dog shit in EU. They got absolutely curb stomped. I know.
Don't get me started.
No,
don't get me started, bro.
Netic was fantastic in the RMR, and I think MHL was just all right. But when they actually those early stints, I forget that it was I think it was Hellcase. I think it was their first tournament they played. And I did like their first 2 or 3 games, and then I did 2 of their later games as well, and it was all MHL. There was no input at all from the 2 young Netic and I forget the other guy's name now. The other young
Addict and Hazza, you mean?
You're talking about Addict. It was Addict, I think, was the other one. Both of them were incredibly underwhelming. Like I'd cast a Netic a couple of times a while ago. I can't even remember what it was, but it was something in Oz. I did one with you as well. But yeah, they were pretty shit in EU, and it was all MHL. So yeah, I know the RMR, obviously, which is the tournament that matters. Netic was incredible. MHL was just whatever. But I really thought Talon were going to make it through, and they didn't. So they underperformed for my liking. But I still think in Oz, that's the issue you've got. You don't have any AWPers. You don't have any top AWPers anyway. Yes. So there's just there's no pool. I mean, this is an issue that a lot of like, I mean, America has the same issue. Like, who is the best American AWPer? Like, you know what I mean? Like, OC, nah. Slight, no. You know what I mean? Like, they've got the same issue that Oz have got, where there's no talent really to look at. So this is where you have to explore elsewhere. Hence why we see teams like Complexity, etc. all do, and Ultimate on Liquid. You have to look abroad, and I think finally FlyQuest have kind of made that move. But yeah, let's move on onto some others. We'll go back to our little Rostermania tracker, and if any jump out, they're notable or worth mentioning, do stop. There's kind of the few ones like Lux leaving Pain. It's whatever. I think, there's the rumor about them picking up Davideus. I think that's pretty cool.
I like it.
I think that's an upgrade. I like Davideus. I did think Lux was quite good, in all fairness, but
I like Lux a lot. I think he wants to play with Nissim on Legacy. That's the whole.
Are they mates?
I think that's confirmed that they've been signed.
Okay. Well, there you go. We got the big moves, benched both Searson and Rigon. I mean, I don't know about you guys. This for me was maybe slightly surprising. I thought Searson's recent form was actually okay. I thought he looked pretty good recently, and I also thought Rigon didn't look bad. I mean, I actually think, like, from what we've seen recently, this big team had looked like the best we've seen out of big, or at least the most exciting we've seen out of big for at least a hot minute. Like for me, all the previous ones were like Prosus. I mean, and Hyped is rumored to come back. I don't know. I was never like, I don't mind Hyped. I think he was all right on alternate attacks, but I don't know. It was just like all the previous rosters felt kind of iffy, and this one at least felt like it had maybe something behind it. I thought JDC had looked fantastic recently in that big team. Obviously, for me, I don't know. I didn't mind it. It feels weird that it felt like, I don't know.
The thing is, it's like with Searson and Rigon, while they had like some decent games and decent performances and maybe some shock ones, they were always a bad online / LAN loss away to a team that you just wouldn't expect a team like Big to lose to at any given opportunity. And I think that while you can have a sort of a straight line of performances over the course of a year with Rigon and Searson, you've kind of reached the point now where that straight line is not going to go up and it's probably not going to go down. You're going to be exactly the same, and I think Big as a team, especially for the likes of Crimbo and Tabson, they're going to want better, and I think that you may as well take a bit more of a gamble on someone that could pop off more rather than your just bog standard Searson performance. Sure, as you say, I agree, he's actually been a little bit better. But anytime you watch Searson play on Big, like, I mean, obviously it's just, maybe it's his personality. I can't bash him for his personality, but he just looks like he doesn't give a shit, right? Which is kind of not what I want from an AWPer, and the style that he has as well, very, very sort of AWP central. We know that it's a fact that he's got more kills with an AWP, than like one of the M4s, I think, in terms of his history. In CS2, you need an AWPer that's actually very, very proficient on rifles as well, and sure, don't get me wrong, I don't know if Hyped is necessarily that person, but I'd rather to see them go for a bit more of a, not necessarily a gamble, but a move that has potential rather than just sticking with what they already had.
The only thing is, so the rumors are Hyped, and do you know who the rifler coming in is going to be?
I heard it might be QB.
Oh, yeah, QB. I like QB. I actually think he's quite solid. But yeah. Again, though, like, I mean, there's a bit of bias here because I also like QB as a person, like love the guy. But I actually thought Rigon was not that bad. I don't know, like, I didn't think he was doing terribly.
The thing is, he would be like, it was hot and cold every time he played for me when I watched Big. Like he would clutch, he would show up with insane clutches, but the consistency in terms of across a tournament, he'd have like these terrible games. I mean, Big as a whole have these terrible games and have them pretty often. I can't necessarily pin the blame solely on him, but yeah, I'd rather see them make a change and look for something a bit different rather than just stick with same old, same old.
I think my frustrations with Big primarily come with the fact that, like, bro, like, give up on the German scene, man, please. Like, there's just no talent there anymore. Like, we're going back to Hyped.
It's Berlin International Gaming, mate. You have to.
But Fnatic, like, NIP are not even gonna have a Swedish player for that, like, in this new team.
Yeah, but their name isn't like Ninjas in Sweden. It's Ninjas in Pajamas.
It's true.
So
it's true, but that is their identity. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, for me, I think the frustrations come with like this kind of thing. Get with the times, man. We're all international now.
Nah,
you know what I mean?
I disagree.
No, like,
man, where's the racism, Neo? Where's the racism?
I don't like racism. You know what I mean? I put my foot down at racism.
Clip it, guys. Clip it. Cancel this guy.
Wait, what? I don't like.
Yeah, cancel him.
That's a good thing. I don't like racism. That's a good thing.
Okay. Look, anyway, what I will say is, like, I think it's kind of like the FlyQuest thing, right? Where for Big, sort of similar to FlyQuest, and honestly, maybe it's somewhat hurried along, maybe even by that loss to FlyQuest. It all ties in together. Illuminati. I think you just go back and look at like the rating graph. It's if you go back and quickly go back to the default page there on HLTV, you'll see like it's just a flat line. This is kind of like what you were saying, Trav, where it's like they peak up around sort of May, June 2024, and then it's like 6-7 months of just kind of like it just goes in the same direction, And first question you have to ask, are you happy with that, right? If you're going to be a national-based team and you're just saying, yep, we're here to represent Germany in the same way that FlyQuest is here to represent ANZ, and you've got a couple of other teams that maybe are of the same volition, the Chinese teams and the Mongolian teams, where you're kind of stuck, and you have to say, look, we're just happy to be competitive enough playing from our particular country. I think that's fine. I don't really have anything against that, right? I think we actually we should value teams that do that, because otherwise you lose scenes, you lose teams, you lose players. We lose, like I've seen all these Korean teams gone, like, and sure, maybe
Yeah.
a lot of people don't give a shit about that, but like, there were some pretty fun teams back in the day. If there was a Korean org that was like, we're investing in CS and we're happy to just be a top 30 team in the world, and we don't need anything more than that. And if that's what Big said, then fine. But if that's not what they think, which is clearly the case, they see the top 17 or around 17 to 20 mark, and they think that's not good enough. We want to be a top 15 team. We want to be a top 10 team. Then yeah, you do need to make changes. So it's kind of just depending on your philosophy as a team and as an org. And I guess Big have gone in that direction in a similar way to FlyQuest, where they've thought, look, even though we are quote unquote good enough, we're not actually good enough. So let's make some changes.
I remember just quickly. I remember actually with Big, way before the rig on, like introduction, like when he got brought into the. I remember like, arguing myself and saying like, why do these guys stick German? And I remember like just like brainstorming what could be the reasons. And I think I need to always kind of remind myself of that. Not every team is trying to be the #1 team in the world. I think I do this quite a lot with top teams where I'm like, what the fuck are these moves? Like, why are they doing this? It doesn't make any sense. And then you forget it's like, for Big, like basically completely funded by, from my understanding, like German sponsors. To have a German team, it makes sense. So I think I need to always kind of bring myself back to this. Like, not every team's trying to be the best team in the world. There's no legitimate way that Big can, unless they're completely deluded, there's no way they think they can compete.
Mate,
like, do you know what I mean? Like,
I just think you're so fucking jaded because of how shit the UK scene is. You guys haven't had a fucking team in like the last 10 years, right? You forgot what it's like to have a team to cheer for.
Yeah, I can't be jaded about a scene that was non-existent. You know what I mean? Like that doesn't make any sense. I started watching CS in like 2018. I don't even know, like, all we had was like,
you missed the golden era, bro. You missed the golden era of when there was actually teams that were from regions.
Yeah, exactly. I can't even be jaded because I wasn't even there. But no, I think I just have to keep reminding myself. I need to do this with quite a few teams. Like, they're actually not trying to be the best. There is some that are trying to be the best and just make like fucking awful decisions. Cough.
Falcons.
Fnatic. Cough. Nip most of the time. However,
oh, you can spend half an hour on Falcons.
Exactly. Yeah, but
we've still got a long way to go, guys.
Yeah, but there's teams that are trying to be the best and make terrible decisions, and there's teams that make what I would say are bad decisions, but then you have to take it in the thing of saying actually they're not trying to be the best. They're just trying to like probably like be relatively competitive, stay in tier 1, eyes on the sponsors, be profitable, right? And I think for the most part, that's probably where Big are. So as much as I don't like the rig on change in terms of, I don't mind QB. I don't think it's bad. And there would be, an abundance of upgrades that in a non-German speaking player, it's not going to happen because there isn't many, really. And especially with Meisterschaft now being dead, there's actually no pathway to really build the German scene up, like specifically. So,
I think the one thing I at least just to finish on this one is that I like if they do go for QB, I like that because of the consistency we saw from him in Sangal. I think the roles he was put in when he was on Fnatic were not things that he was necessarily very comfortable with. And I think now if he goes to Big, I don't think he's necessarily ever been in like the Big setup before and has like, Tabson to sort of learn from. Never had an IGL like that, I think. What was it? Was it Scrunk in that Sangal era? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
and on Fnatic it would have been Body. Like, don't get me wrong, Scrunk actually put some good teams together, but both those two IGLs are not Tabson. So I'm hopeful.
Also, just to finish this off, Tabson is like for me the biggest like what if. I think if Tabson had not been so loyal, 7 years ago to Big, he could have actually been regarded as like one of the best riflers of all time. However, he was stuck. Yeah, he was stuck carrying horseshit for years. And he didn't do a bad job of it. Bless him. But I remember like this is even like probably like before my time, but I remember hearing about this where it was like he could have actually gone to teams like FaZe and stuff like that, and he could have easily like been in those considerations, and he was easily talented enough to be so, but not to be. Right, let's move on to kind of some big moves here, right? And I think the one which is more rumor mill, but could be quite exciting, of course, is Elige, right? This has been the big rumor mill for a while. Where does he go? What does he deserve? Obviously, he's kind of like sort of alluded to it a little bit in terms of he's moving away from the team. Jason Lakes then's come out and said also like, we're not going to stop him. If he deserves to be on a competitive team, yada yada. Where do we think he's going to land? There's obviously the rumors of FaZe. That's the classic one. But there's also the fact that he can kind of slot into basically any team because he's more than good enough.
I think it's like really deep conversation. I think like it's pretty much almost a done deal from what I've read from like Nell and stuff. Same. So I think like I agree with you. He could slot in pretty much anywhere, and now like Elijah's reached the stage of his career where he needs to make that blockbuster move and try and win things again. Because he had his time winning things in North America with Liquid in 2019. We know he's got that in him. We know he's done that. He's proved it. But it's not a major. It's not deep playoffs at a major either. The only time he had that was with Liquid when he was with Simple on the team in like 2016, right? That's a completely different era now. And if he goes to FaZe, I think the angle that I look at it as is that if there's one IGL you'd want to maybe figure out the roles in that team now with an Elige, it would be Carrigan. And my angle is he's playing with Rain, which is just super cool for the reason that the Elige and Rain are like in the sort of conversation of two of the most consistent riflers that have kind of ever played CS:GO/CS2. Like Rain has had his drop-offs, don't get me wrong, but you have to look at like the longevity. Like there's only really 2 or 3 that you can talk about that have had the longevity of Elige and Rain in a top team for that long. Rain's obviously, it's a well known that it's like him and BTN from Nexus, right? Are the only 2 players that have been on the same org for God knows how long. Or same team for God knows how long. Elige sort of like he fits in that breadth of Aniko, who's been doing it since like Mal's 2016. Xantares has been in the Turkish scene /big for and not really letting up in terms of form, and even though now he's now almost reaching 30, right? So I just think it's super cool. Like it's so exciting. It gives FaZe a fresh, a breath of fresh air, I feel like, as well, because they're sort of at the point where, sure, they made both bloody major finals in 2024, but the middle part of the year was clearly very questionable for every single player's form. This will completely freshen them up, I hope. Sure, the questions will remain, how long can Rain and Carrigan truly go on for? But I think it's just a fantastic choice, if it's FaZe.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, I'm definitely for a move to FaZe. I think it makes a lot of sense just in terms of what he can inject into that team. Obviously, we know Elige is like that guy that likes to be on the front foot, So you look at the rifling core, if it were to be an Elige to FaZe move of Carrigan, Rain, and then obviously led by Elige in terms of just pushing your way into wherever it needs to be. And you've got a great closer in Frozen, and obviously Brokey's kind of doing his thing. I think it kind of just makes sense from a roles perspective, to be honest. And I am kind of excited to see it because I've always been a big fan of FaZe. I think they're one of the more enjoyable teams to kind of just follow because of that kind of X factor that this team can bring. And I think Elige is an X factor player. We saw that throughout 2024. So it doesn't really change not so much the philosophy of the team, but the storyline of the team, so to speak. You put him into this team. They've already, as we've just seen, got the ability to go deep in big tournaments. Look, they could have potentially won that major as well had things gone their way on the day. And I don't think that this is such a massive change necessarily for that team that, you take out Rops and you put in Elige and it's going to be like, oh, the team is fucked. They need to do all this and that. It's like, look, yes, it's a very different player. You're getting 2 very different players, but I don't necessarily think that that's actually a bad thing for FaZe. I think Elige could really, really do a lot of good things on this team, a lot of good things for this team. And I think they could still be a potential major winning team if things go right on the day. And that's really all that FaZe kind of needs. They've always been that team, and I think they always will be that team, assuming that this signing comes through. So I'm pretty keen for it, to be quite honest with you. I think it's a great change.
Maybe slightly controversial, but I actually think it's an improvement for FaZe. I know that might sound a little bit wild, but I think Rops has had actually problems with inconsistencies a little bit. And I just think Elige is a superstar. I love when this guy is on his day. I think he's fantastic. Easily for me, you have to kind of feel for complexity because he was keeping that team afloat and they were barely afloat, and I don't know if they will be afloat following losing him, but man, he's so fun to watch. He's such a good player. He deserves a big move like this, and like Trevor's saying, this actually could be a bit of a last hurrah for him. He's not that old, but it's just more the fact that you don't really get more than kind of 2 blockbuster moves as a top player, and this could basically be his last kind of big move to see whether he can really fight for kind of championships again. And also it kind of is a bit of a last dance in some senses because we don't know how much longer we're going to get a Carragher. We don't know how much longer we're going to get a Rain. Obviously these guys are still playing at a very good level, but this could be a bit of a shot in the dark for them and be like, right, let's see if Elige can come in, can bring us back some stability, something that really FaZe have actually lacked for kind of a while. So I'm a big fan of it. I actually really do like this Elige move. I won't if it comes through, but the rumors are that it will come through. So I think it'll be good. Go on.
I've just got a really quick question and want to get both your guys' view on it. If just for like your own personal feelings of think and or want, if FaZe had won the major, would you have wanted Carrigan to say, "I've won the major, I'm stopping here.
No.
I'm not going into next year"?
So I
No,
would
no,
have.
no.
I think that's like a nice like story thing, but no. Carrigan's still
Okay.
got more to give. I think for a while,
About
also
50-50 between people I know have said yes and no to that.
I had this thing as the same thing with Rain, where I was like, oh, you know, Rain could like, if they made like, you know, if they won a major or whatever, you know, Rain could be like, oh, I'm done or whatever. You know, he's got his kids and his family.
Drop the mic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then I remember like, I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been Thorin. Thorin said like, like, I think it might be, I can't remember who it was. Somebody quite smart basically said, why do we judge these guys who like, you know, get families and, you know, get a little bit older and say they can't compete anymore because they got other priorities, when in like every other sport, players get a bit older, still have families and still play, you know, traditional sports kind of thing. And I think it's kind of spot on. Like, and I think as well, I can't remember if it was one of Rain or I think it might be Rain. I think his wife was like, he's not stopping playing. Like,
Yeah.
Bro's making so much fucking money. What?
Yeah, exactly.
Just because we've got a kid doesn't mean he's going to stop playing. Yes, he might, you know, try and spend a little bit more time at home or maybe like, you know, change up his prac schedule a little bit, but he's still going to be a professional. And I think like, it took like, again, it's another thing like where I've had to like kind of alter my mindset a little bit about this. Is like, just because these guys get older, like, especially, you know, for example, like I'm assuming, I don't 100% know, but I'm assuming Rain's wife is a full-time, you know, raising the child and stuff like that, right? And you can afford to do so when you're on FaZe salary and you're, you know, making fairly decent runs. Granted, I think FaZe obviously want to be winning trophies, but hey, you're not going to say no with 200k prize pool. You know what I mean? Split 6 ways with the coach or whatnot. You're not going to say no to that.
I agree with this. Just like 50-50 between people I've spoken to, but like, yeah, that would have been really cool, but it just never would have happened.
Yeah,
like,
I think a lot of people like this, like, you know, like YouTube
ending on a high,
highlight moments kind of thing, like top 10 memorable Counter-Strike moments, but like also like suck my balls. Like, these guys are professionals, they want money. Like,
okay, bro.
I hate like, so a lot of people like, you know, get the rose tinted glasses off. These guys have still got a lot to give. I mean, granted, I think there's probably I think Carrigan would probably be the first to go more than Rain. I just think it's like it's a hard dirt role and obviously a lot more time consuming. I mean, obviously Ray is still I'm assuming very involved, but like I think it's a little bit. I know it's gonna sound super weird, but it's an easier role to coast in, if you know what I mean, right? Compared to like a captain of a team, an IGL, the guy who does all the prep as well. So I think Carrigan probably would be the first to go, but you never know. You never know.
No, I think that, and look, I mean, completely aside from the money conversation and the like the skill level conversation or any of that, I think one of the things that we haven't really quite perfected in esports is that retirement conversation. You know, I don't know how familiar you guys are, obviously, with things like Australian cricket. Probably not very, but I'm sure the same thing happens in you know, football, any sport kind of thing like that. You know, when the legends retire, often what happens is that they're not actually kicked from the team, and then it's like, oh, your career is over. There's like this understood kind of conversation that like you're on your way out, and then they say, look, this is my last event. This is my last, like, for example, in cricket, right? We talk about that amazing Australian team, you know, the Shane Warne, Adam Gilchrist, like these kinds of names,
Steve
Shane
Waugh,
et cetera, et cetera.
I don't know for cricket, but I would have said that.
It's like Glenn McGrath, all these kinds of names. And you knew when it was their last series, they said, this is going to be my last series that I play in Australia. And then you have, you know, those 5 matches that if you're like a massive fan of these guys, yeah, sure, they're at the end of their career and maybe they're not the same player that they were 10 years ago when they were at their peak, but they're still, you know, a very, very good player. And we're talking about something like a Rain or a Carrigan. We're talking about legendary figures in FaZe, in CS. You know, have we really had that world where a player has gone, look, this is my last major cycle. Whatever happens, happens. I will be retiring at the end of this. Can you imagine? You know, we look at like, I'm looking at like some of the players that have retired over the last sort of like couple of years. I mean, like, for example, like Kenny S, you know, he sort of retired at the Paris Major. It was like, mate, you're basically unofficially retired for like the last 3 or 4 years as it is. Like,
Exactly,
you know,
Olaf
Freiburg's, I think,
said it,
Olaf, you know, it's like, no, you know, could you not have 2 or 3 years ago kind of gone, look, this is going to be my last thing, and everyone would have been like, fuck, that's awesome. You know, we got to see his last event, and sure, you can still play in like some of these tier 2 events and whatever, same as cricket players play in their fucking 2020 leagues, and no one gives a shit about that. It's like, you've made your retirement from tier 1 CS, let's say, and then you get to
Yeah.
have your moment. There's the whole storyline of, oh, this is, like, let's say 2025, Carrigan goes, this is my last year of Counter-Strike. Everyone's gonna be like, fuck Carrigan, he's such a sick cunt. Gets to the end of
Yeah,
2025, and we're in that last major. Let's say he does another major run, makes it all the way to the final, just misses out, but it's like, man, what a player, what a career.
I agree.
That was awesome. Carrigan gets his flowers, probably has a little special send-off at the major. That's how it should be, instead of people just fading into obscurity. So
I
no,
agree,
I
yeah.
wouldn't necessarily want to see someone go, oh, I took second at this major, I'm retiring now. I want them to say, this is my last 12 months, this is my last 6 months, I'm going to retire. And let's really put the focus on those legends in that time.
Agreed. It's kind of like how Formula One drivers do it. They will announce it like halfway through the season. So
Yeah.
this last like 8 races will be my last in Formula One. I've had a wonderful career. Let's send it off. And then when the last race happens, it's actually a really nice, like, all the teams come together. If they're a really loved team member, like all the teams will come together. All the drivers will come together and say, "Oh yeah, thanks so much for being such a great legend of the sport." All that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
I completely agree with you on that one. I mean, if you look at Guardian, right? That's actually not a bad example.
Yeah.
He technically retired properly, and then he was like, "Oh well, I played this advanced game and I'm absolutely farming these noobs. Like, I need to play. Let's play for a bit of fun. It's not retired. It's just playing tier 2, like you said, Jordan, for fun. So
yeah, like what Boomer Demons do, right? Like,
yeah,
no one's calling them pro players. You'll know they're retired, but like you can still play and say. So I agree. I would love the sentiment of where players are like, I'm retiring from tier 1 Counter-Strike. I'm still gonna play. I'm gonna stream. I'm gonna play a couple of calls with the boys, right? And if we do something, we'll do something. But I'm not full time anymore. I'm not gonna be like really gunning for trophies. And then you can get that proper send off, which is like the opposite. I think Jordan, you kind of mentioned Freiburg there as an example. I think that's a great one. This is a legend of the game, somebody who really was fantastic, but like fucking hell, his last year and a half was abysmal. What was the team called again? Dignitas, right? And then what was the team he died died and then he retired? I can't remember what it was called now. I'm gonna look it up. But it was like one team that he played on towards the tail end that were like absolutely like dreadful. And you get the gist, right? It was just like it was a rough kind of run of things.
I mean, the whole
there was one team he played on though that was like really bad.
To be fair, the whole Dignitas team,
like
having Forest, Freiburg get right at one point, and Exist actually, I think at one point as well, was literally like, it was like Last Dance Sweden, So
that's fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with that, but you shouldn't be pretending that that's like
exactly
the same thing as playing an NIP in 2018 or 2015 or whatever it was. You know what I mean? Like, you can do the same thing. They could have had their send off in like 2019 or whatever, 2018. I don't know, whenever. All of them probably faded from relevance, let's just say. But you have that little send off, and then you're in this Dignitas team, and if they're a signed team and they're getting a salary and they're playing in some tier 2 EU stuff, that's fine. That's actually the perfect case scenario, because people still want to watch them play, but it's pretty obvious that they're not competing for like top spots. So I just think that that's something that we haven't necessarily figured out, and I don't know if that's maybe just because of the maturity of the scene. We don't build those storylines in the same way that traditional sports do, but we're kind of getting to that point. Counter-Strike is now 20 years old. We've had players that have had careers for over a decade that are kind of still going. So that's kind of where you're at with regards to traditional sports as well. And when you're getting into like that 35 to potentially even 40 era, then I think it's time to kind of say, all right, well, this is where I hang it up. But
I'm glad I started that little
conversation
debate.
for another day.
Yeah,
but we can get back on track now.
Right. Let's head back to the tracker. Where can we go back to that's like worth mentioning? There was one more somewhere around here.
There's Nico. We haven't talked about Nico to Falcons.
I was going to talk about just it seems we're talking sort of about FaZe and Elige just Rops the vitality like the other way. Like Rops wants the vitality, so Elige takes that spot. For the most part, what are people's thoughts on that? Rops taking Spinks's position, heading into.
I don't think there's much to say, really, is there?
Yeah.
Like, it's just like,
honestly,
don't mind it, don't hate it.
Go into Liquid as well. It feels a bit weird for me. First of all, I don't really understand why vitality. I don't know if they wanted to get rid of Spinks. I haven't really read into it. Like,
I don't think
I've heard that he wanted to go.
I've heard that he wanted to go, and in general, they actually like. I think it's a stretch to say they didn't enjoy playing with him, but they'd kind of like reached the end of their time they wanted to play with him. Do you know what I mean? Like,
really?
it was like
hard to
I
play.
think they're like kind of like we're done with Spinks now. Let's move on. Let's try and get someone different. And I think with Rops being on the market and available, it's like let's take this gamble. Rops gets to play with with an AWPer that isn't brokey. I mean, it's obviously a little bit rude, but you're playing with Zywoo for goodness sake. So, it's a totally different kettle of fish.
Yeah, he gets to play with second best AWPer we've kind of got in the game. At the moment, so not bad. Yeah,
I like that. That Vitality would be cool actually, because Mezzi's upped his game a little bit too. I think it's actually an
There's
interesting,
still
very
rumors about him
interesting
getting cut from the team though, which is interesting.
I know, but he's fine for now.
I feel like every 2 minutes we hear that, but he never plays bad, especially in the roles he's in. So I don't know, especially also if Apex, obviously there's rumors of him going to Falcons. If that did happen, they probably would have had to kept Mezzi, because I'm assuming he probably would have called. So that'd have been probably a wild time. I guess I think he's probably quite happy that he doesn't have to call though, because I don't think he actually really enjoys it. But
IGL era Mezzi was actually like pretty decent, because I think he called around himself a little bit on Fnatic, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
his numbers were really good.
Also because the rest of that Fnatic team was shit, so he was like, I'm just gonna do everything here. But the one that I do think is actually probably kind of interesting is minus Yukindar plus Nerds. Now, I've seen actually quite a big debate about this, by people saying like plus and for it. Like, I'm very plus it. I don't think Yukindar's been good for a long time. I think this is interesting for a more, lots of different reasons. First of all, I think Nerds is an upgrade. I think he's better. I think he is a better player, and I think the only difference is obviously like the roles is going to be kind of an interesting talking point with this trade. But for me, for the most part, I think just like raw firepower wise, I prefer Nerds over Yukindar, especially for the last year and a half of Yukindar being like as bad as he has been. Right. The other interesting thing is that it now means that Liquid can actually play as an Asian qualified team. Because
there's no way they're going to do that, by the way.
Yeah, true, but I'm just saying they've got the option, right? There's no way they're going to do it, because it just doesn't. But then again, also, I know they have been American, but they're not an American org, so it doesn't mean they've not got like that much allegiance. They're a Dutch org, you know what I mean? They've not got like that much allegiance to America in the sense of like, oh, we have to stick here. But what I'm saying is they have the option now, with Nerds joining into this team, to actually play in Asia, which first of all would be hilarious. I don't think they'll do it. It doesn't make too much sense for them to do it, but I do think it's kind of hilarious that they got that choice.
It would be a bigger conversation to be had, to be honest, because obviously, with the changes to the Valve, the major system, which we'll get to at some point in this episode, the MRQs, we don't really know exactly how that's going to play out, particularly for Asia, because of the ping situation. So there might be some regionality issues with regards to that. So look, I don't know. I mean, but in particular on the Nerds change, I think it's great for him, obviously, right? Like Heroic seems to be falling apart at the seams. You kind of got to go somewhere. I feel like he's been one of their better players as well, to be quite honest. So just a lateral move into a sort of a like-for-like team in terms of, maybe not a team that's necessarily competing for the top trophies. Let's say like Heroic and Liquid are like, if we're talking about tier 1 teams being teams that will win away a major potentially, I don't know that they're quite there. Like they're probably in that 1.5 sort of Liquid, Heroic, Mongols, those kinds of names that are like they're challenging, but they're maybe not quite there. I think it's a lateral move for him in that sense. Not too bad. And I think for Liquid as well, obviously something had to change, right? Yukindar going out, fair enough. I think, again, this is kind of like that alley situation where, like you said, there, where there's smoke, there's fire. It's been talked about for a very, very long time. Something had to change on that Liquid roster. It seemed obvious that it was going to be Yukindar and bring Nerds in. I don't hate it as a change at all. I think it's a win-win for everyone, probably bar Yukindar, I guess, but we'll see where he ends up, so...
Yeah, I hope for Yukindar's sake that, there's rumors about, Paravision rebuilding with Jame, because so it'd be like Kicker, Art Frost. I don't know how it's going to work actually, Art Frost and Jame. But I have no idea how Art Frost and Jame on the same team's going to work. But still,
Art Frost has been benched. He's been cut.
Has he been benched?
Yeah. So it's minus Art Frost. I can't remember who the other one. Minus Art Frost. Was it like Dilladev?
They lost. Patsy got bought by Aurora, or Patsy went to Aurora.
There was another one. Was it Dilladev? Was Dilladev on our team? Or was he?
Dilladev was on 9 Pandas.
No, okay. It was minus Art Frost, minus somebody else.
Okay, but
and
still,
it was plus Jane plus Norbert.
I'm getting distracted. But yeah, plus Jane plus Norbert. There's also an argument to say, like, if would we actually possibly go back to Yukindar playing with Jame, if that's a possibility? I think that'd be really cool. But
I think he needs
someone to unlock him again.
Speaking team again, though. I think he needs to go back to his roots, because like that's when he did his best work. Like they just need to make him like a little bit of like a kind of back to being a bit of a brain dead entry in a sense of just like just do what you do best, raw aim. I think he's had a lot a lot more on his plate for the last like year and a half, and I think it's obviously hindered his performance quite a lot. I think when Yekindar was like, I mean, at one point he was without a doubt the best entry fragger in the world. Like he was untouchable. Like,
and when CS2 came out, we thought it would make him better.
I know, and he only did the opposite thing, right? But like,
Yeah.
I remember the age old meme of like, nobody wants to face Yekindar on Banana. Like that is like the worst possible player. Like to be like a CT Banana player against that VP team was like the worst thing in the world because of how good Yekindar was. And I think he needs to kind of go back to that a little bit. So as much as I think obviously he's probably, I think for me, he will probably look back at this like benching by Liquid and actually be quite happy about it. I mean, this last year has been horrible for him. He's obviously been quite unhappy. You can see in the face cams, you can see in the way he tweets as well, being like, yeah, fuck my bad guys. Like, I'm trying, you know what I mean? Like, you can tell it's obviously super stressful, not a nice environment to be in. I think this is actually going to be a really good thing for him. He's a fantastic player. I still think he's got a lot to give. I just think he actually needs to go back to his roots and going back to a Russian speaking team, back in EU, and just kind of being able to be comfortable again, playing, not having to call, not having to worry about like, the bigger picture. Like it's like, right, you can do your job is do this round kind of thing. I think that's actually where we're going to get the best out of him. So I actually hope, whether it is with Jame and Norbert, that'd be kind of hilarious. Bring Kick It back in, the old boys back together. Would be kind of funny, right? But I just hope it's like, a Russian speaking team where he can kind of just go back to doing his simple roles, which, simple is good in this sense.
Yeah. I agree with you on that one. Considering we just spoke about Nerds, do you want to talk about the heroic move, the core leaving to Falcons, and we can bring Nico conversation in?
The actual answer is no, I don't.
Well, it's as this podcast started, that got made sort of like official, right? The announcement got it made out. So the core of heroic had gone to Falcons. Now, considering what it potentially could have been, I think Falcons did okay. Right. Because it was at one point, now granted, I love me some Jambo action, some jambalaya, as they say. Great player. Jerks. And you jerks, I think, are two kind of tier 2, like they're pretty fucking good for tier 2 and can play at like tier 1.5. However, for a team of Falcons, not standards, because their standards are piss poor, but of their like, their reputation, their ambitions, exactly. That is bad potential. Move. Exactly, right? This I actually do like. Now when you look at it, first of all, I gotta say, I feel bad for Shush, right? This is now the second time that Shush has been left out, right? He could have had his moves, but he always just gets kind of stuck behind while his teammates go elsewhere. First happened with Stabby, and now, of course, happens here, but more so is the fact that he's no longer with Tessus anymore, bless him. But I actually think the move here for Falcons is as good as they could have done. I can't genuinely think where else they could have done better. The rumors flying around for on heroic side, I think this is a good thing to do. Now that might sound crazy, but the rumors are that heroic had got somewhere in the regions of 10 million for this. Fucking hell, lads, take that.
Not just for this, by the way.
Over the course of the year.
Over the course of the year for all the changes.
Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I can understand monetarily speaking why they've made these sort of moves, right? Like that is a shit ton of money. Like, and especially because like a year and a half ago at one point, Heroic on the brink of bankruptcy. I can sort of understand why they're in a position now where they want to, those people who bought them out, or they want to, get some of that cash back, get a bit of ROI, and also bit of stability, right? The issue is now Heroic obviously in a really tough spot, but we can kind of come back to that in a second. Falcons as a whole, I don't know what moves they could have made to get a team that A, can get guaranteed like wildcard spots or just spots as a whole, and kind of be competitors. So I think in this way, they've obviously paid quite a bit, but they've got a core, and a core which is pretty decent. Deg says Orpa for me, who I think can be at a tier 1 level. I think his fall has been a little bit off, but I think, like, for me, he always kind of passes the eye test. I always think he's a very solid player. I think Tessus and Shush have both looked incredible this year. I think, like, it's kind of felt in hindsight, especially with Astralis looking so bad, that, maybe the gems in Heroic or overall were Tessus and Shush. They look so good. And then I still think Kicksan's a very solid caller, right? So I don't mind that. Then you got, that Falcons team with like Nico and Magist to round it off. I think that's really solid. I think it's a team that should compete, right? Magisk into the Shush roles, nice and simple. Obviously, that's why Shush couldn't make it. Overlapping roles there. Nico, arguably one of the best riflers we got in the game. Boom, boom. That for me is
I
actually
don't
a
know,
solid
man.
team. The only issue, yeah. So this is the thing that I kind of I've had to like hold myself back from on Twitter. Seeing people talk about this, people be like, "Oh, you know, these moves are so shit." Like, what moves? What actually?
No.
Falcons
Go
It's
off,
do?
not.
Jordan,
It's
go
not.
off.
It's not. It's not even though. Like that's the thing. It's like I'm kind of the same opinion as you, where I look at this and I go, you know what? They've probably done what they could have, but I think it
Yeah.
just ends up being disappointing again for Falcons because of what we've heard in the past. It feels like a repeat of 2024, right? I'm in this position now where I'm looking at this and going, is this ENS 2.0? Basically, you've taken a core of an already established team that was doing really quite well. Like ENS back then were doing pretty well. Heroic have been doing pretty well. You know, you've essentially kind of killed that team. So we lose that team. Then we bring them into Falcons for a bit of a like it looks like it might work. You know what I mean? Like you look at it and you go,
Sure.
okay, it might work. But then it didn't work last year. You've brought Nico across now as well. That is not killing G2 in the sense, but you look at that from the perspective of Nico and go, would I rather be here or would I rather be in G2 still? No, I think I'd be looking at G2 and thinking that looks pretty good to me right now. And then, you know, it's just like, again, Falcons, the conversation around these guys was maybe they're going to get Jimmy, Monacy, Nico, plus Mages plus one. And it's like, well, that would have been fucking sick. But now you've got this. And it's like, it's not bad, but it's like, it's not really quite there. And so we're kind of killing 2 or 3 teams on the way. And then we end up with this. We don't really know what it will be. It could end up being a pile of shit. It could end up being good. I think the reason that they've obviously gone for Heroic Core is that they wanted the VRS ranking. That's the other conversation point here is that like you can't just now put together a new team. You kind of have to pull a Core 3 from somewhere.
But
which
that's what I mean. Like,
I think
what
is
else could they actually have done? I think.
What else could they have done? But it's a negative, I think. I don't think it's a good thing necessarily that they're
But I don't
forced
think
into
it's
that.
their fault. Yeah, I think it's the VRS rankings fault. Like, you know, if we're talking
Sure,
like,
but-
if we're talking like a year ago, this team on paper, like, or like if they had been able to like, you know, pick and choose players from teams, then it's a different story. Like, sure, then I would say like,
But
okay,
what gets you more excited? No, if you're going to be fucking looking into 2025 and I'm going to say I need to make a team that's going to get you rock fucking hard, is it going to be 3 players from Heroic, Magisk, and Nico, or is it going to be Jimmy, Monacy, Nico, Magisk, and fucking Simple? You know what I mean? Like whatever. Like let's just pull that out of
It's
ass.
going to be a number 8 ranking in VRS. That's what it is. Because
Bullshit.
This is what we're talking about. We can't. This isn't Football Manager anymore. We're talking about a system. Granted, let me put out there. It's a shit system. We're basing. Everything is based off prize money. How that's so stupid as a whole. It's so many flaws, and that's something we can come to a little bit later. But as Falcons, they could not have really done better. Because let's say, for example, we do go Nico, Monacy, Jimfa, Magisk +1. They
But
basically
is
would have
this
had
what we
to have
wanted
gotten another
from
G2.
Falcons?
Yes, but they can't though, and this is the issue. That
I know, but it doesn't matter. It's like this
You
whole.
can't
The
blame
only
Falcons for
reason
that.
we care
You
about them,
cannot
the
blame
only reason we
Falcons for that.
care is
you have to blame Valve. You can't say to
I'm
Falcons,
not
this is
blaming
under-
Falcons.
You have to say this system's shit. Why? So, for example, we could have had right a super team. We could have had like Zaiwu, you know, Yimfa, and
fuck
top
yeah, let's
picked
go.
you know, 5 best players from top 5 teams, and that team is, you know, on paper the best team in the world. They can't fucking play any tournaments because
Here's
of
the
this
thing, though.
shit
Here's the thing.
ranking system, right? This is what I mean. This is the best Falcons could have done because of this dumbass ranking system.
I know it is,
Could have had the
and
5
I agree.
best players in the world, and they would not have been a team because of stupid VRS.
Yes.
So they end up playing fucking CCT, and we're all fucked.
I'm
right?
not debating
It's
any of
stupid
this.
as
I'm
shit.
not.
So
I'm not.
that's what I like. It's the best they could have done.
Okay.
Man. They had to get a ranking.
I'm not debating any of that, and I agree with everything there. But the thing is, bro, I don't give a fuck. Like, I don't give a fuck about this Falcons team until they actually do something, because I've been burned before. You know, going into 2024, I was like, man, this is going to be cool. We could see a really cool team here. Yeah, they're going to spend a lot of money. And then it was like, does anyone care about this team? Literally, can you tell me in 2024 that you gave a shit about this team?
No,
you
I
have
love
to
it.
say
it
no.
was, it was
It was
hate
hilarious.
watching.
It
We'd
was
watch it
hilarious.
to hate watch.
Literally.
Yeah, it was
And
fun.
then
That's all.
going into 2025, you can't look at that and tell me, guaranteed, that they're going to be as good as the previous Heroic roster. They might be. I'm not debating that at all. But I'm at the point where I'm like, I'm just checked out of this Falcons thing until they start getting good. I don't give a shit. I don't care.
What I will say for Falcons, let's just say that Falcons do have this open checkbook. I don't know how much the rumor for this core, 6 mil is what they pay for this core. Granted, that kind of comes with the VRS kind of ranking and whatnot, but Even right in saying after the Austin Major in June, they whatever their ranking is, they then keep it. Even right in saying like even if they were to make a couple of changes, so maybe the way forward, let's say Falcons do have an open checkbook, is sign a core, get the number 8 ranking, boom boom, let's go into 2025 and get guaranteed invites to Kato, yada yada yada, etc. Right, and then after we've now got this spot secured, regardless of what changes we make, then we can make changes off the back of it. So like maybe
isn't that just shit though?
Yeah, but
like,
it's not
is
their
that
fault
not just
though.
piss?
But like,
like, it's not, but it's shit.
That's what I mean, right? So like, we could see a world in which people talking about the Infat, signing or the Modesty signing or whatever, right? Whatever big name person, whatever that.
How like happen, it's like at that point, bro. It's like how many teams are we gonna see get killed by Falcons in their inevitable march towards building this super team? Like this is the exact same conversation we were having this time last year going into 2024. It's like they're gonna put together this team and they're gonna play it for however long and then they're gonna build the team that they want. Well, that fucking took 12 months. Now we're again back at square one where it's like, oh, we're gonna put together a team because we have to, and then we're gonna build the team we want. It's like, well, when are you gonna build this fucking team, bro? Because it just hasn't happened. Like, what do you want?
I do agree, but I just think in this sense, it's just not their fault. It's just because of how stupid the system is. Like, if we had started the system of like last year where you could just get invites based off whatever, right? Then it's different. Then we could talk about how actually like they could have built the super team and cherry picked the best players and had this open checkbook and yada yada. But they just can't because of how the system works, where you need cores, right? And that's the
I just resent it.
Yeah,
it sucks.
The thing is, I think the way to appease, if this is going to happen, if they do have this open checkbook that we always hear about, that maybe we see them after the Oster Major, then make another big ticket signing. Once now that they're, they are Falcons, this is their lineup, yada yada. Then they can bring in the likes of a Yimfat or whatever. Granted, who knows if this is going to happen? No, but this is the argument that I've had with a lot of people.
Here's the thing, though.
Same as you, it's like this is so underwhelming. It's just the issue of like where else, like any team, like I can't remember the ranking off the top of my head now, but like okay, top 5 teams: G2 Spirit, Na'Vi, FaZe, Vitality. They're not getting any of those cores. Number 7 Mongols. Yeah, it's not happening, is it? Mao's not happening, right? And then it's heroic, right? So they've actually they've got a core of an 8th ranked team. Like that is like that's pretty respectable. I know it's not like
let's say they get this team together. Let's say by the end of 2025 they get Jimmy and they get Monacy. All right. Over 2 years, we've now for that team we've now killed Ents, Maus, Heroic, and potentially G2. We've killed 4 teams to get this what could be quote unquote a super team, and it's taken 2 years. Is that worth it? To me, it's not. To me, I would rather still see those other 4 teams existing in their iterations that we saw. Personally,
that's just when you have money like that, we see it in football, right? Man City, PSG, they'll kill anybody along the way if it means that they can kind of build this super.
This is why racism is the way, bro. It wouldn't happen in the racist era of Counter Strike. Okay, you see, you literally said Mongols not going to happen. Let's go, Mongols on top.
I mean, to be fair, Mongols actually could because their buyouts are probably absolutely like nothing comparatively speaking.
Yeah, but you'd have to pick up the whole team. Well, actually, no, you wouldn't. They do actually speak English, so it's kind of a moot point. But
yeah, exactly.
The thing is as well,
that's actually like financially a way better decision. Why don't they just poach,
shut up?
Just poach a Mongols for Mongols aren't saying no to that money. You know what I mean?
Just stop this conversation right here. You've already killed all the European teams that look. At the end of the day, I don't really give 2 fucks. Like it's Europe, whatever. You guys got plenty of good teams. You can afford to lose a couple. If you come along and now kill Mongols, the one team that's literally giving me a slight little bit of hope in the Asia scene, I will fucking off myself.
Well, actually, how hilarious would it be if Falcons just like I mean. I always forget this. Like Mongols like are an org, but like kind of aren't an org at the same time, right? It's like a little bit weird in that sense. But either way, Falcons can buy them tenfold, right? It's just funny this came in. Just
surely.
Like, hey, number 7 ranked in the world? Yes, please. We'll take your VRS ranking. Here's.
I don't mind if they buy the whole team. That's fine. But if you take like, let's say you just were like, oh, we're going to take Senzu and Blitz. You'd be like, all right, there goes the Mongols. Like that's the team.
I don't know, Techno or whatever.
Senzu, Blitz, 9-10 or something, or Mzinho or something. Like, I mean, you could pick any 3 really.
9-10, I guess, because you need the AWPA. There we go.
Yeah, I think you pick any 3, but like then you just kill the Mongol. It's like, oh well, thanks for that, guys. You've just killed the only thing that I enjoy in Counter Strike anymore.
That would actually be quite funny. But yeah.
Oh god.
To round it up, I think you know, the what ifs of this Falcons team is obviously would have been sick. It's just the stupid system holds them back, right? Where they have to sign a core. If this was like a year and a half ago, I think Falcons could have made, you know, these insane signings of like cherry picking the best players from the best teams and having this open checkbook, and it would have been awesome, right? Nico, Yimfat, Monacy, yada yada. It would have been sick, but they just can't, unfortunately. With
I
how things
think I
are.
think they would have still done it though. Like I wonder if, you know, because we hear these rumors that like if Monacy was saying, if, or was it Jimmy that was saying, if Monacy goes, I'll go, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I feel like it's kind of like Falcons wanted to do it. They didn't give a fuck. They would have built the team and they would have run with it. But I almost wonder if it's like the players looking at it and going, I wonder if this is now like a bad move. Like, are we going to be able to get the tournaments that we want to get if we go? And someone pulling out for that reason, and therefore everybody else pulls out.
It's true. Yeah. It's true. It's cooked, but I think that's the system.
And what Jordan said as well about killing teams, like killing Ents, like that was, I think that was of all the ones so far, that's probably one of the saddest ones because they just recently won, like, you know, was it Dallas Ents one, I think, with Snappy, right?
I can't remember.
Exactly, but they'd won a LAN that year. Now you're killing Heroic, who are just like they're peaking after Shanghai,
exactly,
which is what, you know, if you're losing Nerds anyway, then obviously like it's whatever because you are losing a big star of that team by losing Nerds. But also, like, I know this might not matter to some people, but you're not just killing one team now, you're also killing two. Because Sangel will now cease to exist in Counter-Strike because Heroic are buying their core and they don't even have Yotto anymore because he's back to Eternal Fire setup. So it's like, you've benched Samin, you don't have Jota, and you've lost the Sangel core. That team now has to rebuild from zero. And if I just reading what, you know, Fragar said in chat actually about, you know, NIP rebuilding with what would be technically not a core.
Yeah.
Like, that's interesting because how does that go in the future? Will that be an option? If you look at Sangel and NIP, how they choose to rebuild at two different levels, I would say, of Counter-Strike. NIP rebuilding at sort of a tier 1.5, tier 2 level. Sangel probably have to rebuild at a tier 2, tier 3 level. Like, how does that actually work out for them? Sangel have no team whatsoever, and I want to get into a little point just before the end of the pod about ECL EU, about some of the dead teams that are going to be there. I just want to list some of those off to you because it's actually quite an interesting conversation. But, you know, Sangel is one of them, and it's sad for them, without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, worth touching on because we kind of already alluded to Nip a little bit. I've got the kind of I don't know, roster that's sort of meant to be or potentially going to be Snappy, Shush, Aristosh, Ujerks alongside Wrinkle as well. It is an interesting point though. What I didn't even think about this when I originally saw this sort of tweet, but yeah, what is actually going to happen to this team? Do they get wildcard invites? I don't even know how. I can't remember how wildcard invites even work. So, again,
well, you'd have 3 players who have been on a top 20 team.
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking.
But
right?
isn't it top? Is it like a top 10 or top 8? I can't remember exactly because I think I'm on the same page as you. Like, there's some of these Valve rules that like I remember for like a day and then forget again.
Dude, it's so convoluted.
It's actually so frustrating. We'll get onto that MRQ thing in a minute. But yeah, you know, if this is actually an NIP team, my opinion is that that probably won't be the actual team. I reckon they might actually look at keeping Rez still. That's just my personal feeling. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I think they still might keep Rez. But you know, that's a sort of a team they end up with the 2 Portuguese stars from SOAR. You get your anchor with Shush. You get an IGL that's looking to redeem himself, which is a kind of a team for Snappy, which he's done better with in the past, right? Like he's done better with the sort of quote-unquote lower quality players and brought them up to elevated their level, as opposed to what we saw with Falcons, which was an entire mess, as he admitted himself. I think that's a really cool thing if we get to see Snappy lead NIP and try and make something happen with them in a team like this.
Is he actually now? Did he get benched? Is he benched or is he actually out of his contract at Falcons? That's what I'm actually unsure about.
I'm not sure about that.
It looks like he's actually not in his contract, judging by what I'm seeing here. So that is the case.
I think he's out. Yeah.
If you go to his profile, it might.
Yeah. Well, his profile just says no team.
Oh, I'm reading. Yeah.
So I mean,
they don't have that information for every player, but
it's true. If that is the case, though, there's actually some incredibly shrewd business in a way, because the only person they'd be signing would be Shush, and let's say it's not even Shush, it's Rez. That's actually really interesting because Aristosh and Ujerks are all free agents, and Snappy seems like he might be a free agent as well. That's 3.
It'd be decent business.
That's 3 very, people for free.
The first time.
Yeah, which is crazy. Yeah, exactly. This is the first time I've actually been like semi-excited about an NIP team in maybe like 3-4 years. So yeah, it's kind of sick. I still think Wrinkle's got a lot to give. Whether it's Rez or I'm assuming Shush is probably the debate there. But let's say it is Rez instead of Shush. That is then, a complete team overhaul for free. Which actually, fair fucks. That's pretty good. You've got to actually competitive team. It's just more so how does it work with ranking. I'm not 100% sure how this is going to end up playing out. It's probably an interesting conversation itself. I don't know if they just get wildcard rankings, but this whole system's kind of stupid. But either way,
don't know.
I like the NIP signings if they are to be. That's what they're rumored as.
Can I just say about like on that sort of rankings thing? Not just TOs, but orgs as well behind the scenes. Props to whoever's employed to keep track of this shit. Yeah. Right.
Oh.
Like, who to sign?
A Messioso, right? Don't they?
Yeah, like who to sign to keep your slots. Who you might have to keep a slot, all this sort of back and forth shit. Someone has to be hired or involved with an org. It has to be in control and in charge of that, and it's a
just
absolute nightmare with how
it's like
Valve,
a full-time job, mate.
Yeah,
it's a nightmare with how much Valve changed things and word things as well, which we'll get onto a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of, let's touch and move on to the major system and how this is kind of all changing. And Trav, I thought, you kind of sent this in. Do you want to sort of explain this for the people, be the explainer? I know Messioso did a bit of a tweet about it as well. But do you want to kind of...
So I'll give you a really TLDR here. The TLDR is that basically the things that are now called the MRQ, the major regional qualifiers, are what the closed qualifiers used to be.
Yes.
Pretty much. And then that leads into stage 1 of the entire 32-team major, rather than an RMR, if I've got that correct in my head.
I believe that's right. At least that's my understanding as well.
Yeah, so there's a lot of question marks about that. It's like, do you want... Because obviously there's a lot of discussion about it's going to be shit if the major region, the MRQs are going to be online and not LAN. Sure, the close qualifiers were online and not LAN as well, but, ARMRs were always LAN, and we don't have that now. We have a 32-team major go straight into stage 1 from the MRQs. So you have teams that will qualify to the actual major through an online qualifier.
Yeah.
Likely.
Is this debatably them just saying like an RMR with like more steps and fancier wording, but worse format? That's kind of like my I think for Asia this like unless it is LAN, but there's no confirmation that it is LAN, right? This is the thing. If this is online, how do you even do this? Like
it is and it isn't. This is the thing. Like, and I think we have to kind of like wait and see. It's a little bit of a wait and see pudding type situation.
Yes.
I don't know if you guys, when you were kids, you said, "Mum, what's for dinner?" She'd say, "Wait and see pudding," and you didn't. You just had to wait and see.
No.
I think that's kind of like what we that's what we have for this major system going into 2025. I think it's a bit of wait and see pudding. It's obviously we're inviting 16 teams to the major itself for stage 2 and stage 3 based on the Valve regional standing. So there's that. So it's not. It is and it isn't. I don't know why they've called it MRQ as opposed to RMQ. I think we could have gone with RMQ, regional major qualifier. It makes more sense to me than major regional qualifier, especially following the fact that we had RMR. We might as well have gone RMQ.
New abbreviation.
Wake up, babe. Keep changing it, bro? Like, why do we just go back to minors? Just call them minors. Just call them the minors. And anyway, minors, majors. That sounds fucking awesome. Anyway, look. Besides that point. If we're talking specifically Asia, but this is also a conversation point for Americas as well, the ping thing is a huge discussion, to be quite honest with you. And I can talk to it obviously from the Asia perspective, just because that's my area of expertise. But again, remember, this is a factor for America as well. I think, it raises a lot of questions because, as you said, it might not necessarily be a LAN. If it is a LAN, then fucking awesome. That's all good. It basically just replaces the RMR, which basically just replaced the minor. And it's basically just the same thing for Asia, except now we get 4 slots instead of potentially 2 slots, potentially 3 slots, potentially whatever. Sure. Obviously, Mongols will be getting that invite straight through to, I believe, stage 3 from that one invite slot that we get. So that would be good. But what I think actually will end up happening, because of the fact that it does say we can now do it online, is you're going to have to split those 4 remaining slots regionally based on the sub-regions that you could have within Asia, which now is a whole conversation around what are those sub-regions going to be. One of them has to probably be Oceania, because Oceania cannot play anywhere but with itself. Then you're going to have potentially I think Middle East Africa, which already is going to be a problem because Middle East and Africa can't really play against one another. So one of those regions kind of gets fucked. Probably the African teams then have to go and play in like Dubai, or I don't know. Look, I'm not even like, as far as an expert on the region is concerned, like that's even a more niche version of the Asia sub-region. Like that in itself, the whole of the Middle East has all these ping routing issues, and then you add Africa into it, it's like, bro, you're cooked. So I think that's probably what we'll do, and it's just like, fuck you, South Africa. Sorry, nothing we can really do for you because there's just not enough slots. And then you have to go and look, okay, well, does China deserve its own qualifier? Just have a Chinese qualifier? That's normally what they do, but then you're kind of running into this situation where, well, what's the other qualifier? Is it rest of Asia? In which case, then that's kind of just Mongolia, and everyone else kind of gets fucked because then, look, Southeast Asia teams are going to get just hard owned by Mongolia. Or do you do this kind of East Asia, which would then be China and Mongolia having to play against each other? That doesn't really sound particularly fair because then you'd have one of those teams, and then you'd probably have like some Southeast Asia team kind of qualifying, in which case you'd have a weaker field. But you're getting a weaker field by having a Middle East qualifier as well. Like, it's just, I don't know. I think in my ideal world, you'd want to have a LAN qualifier, or at least a qualifier where it's like all teams now have to go and play from Asia, right? Like you all go and play in, if you're in China, if you're in Mongolia, fine, you stay there. If you're not from one of those close regions, you fly to play in China or play in Singapore or wherever you can to play ping. And we get the 4 best teams out of Asia, because I think otherwise you're running into this situation where you're just, again, like diluting the talent pool, but even to a more egregious extent. And yes, you're giving us more slots, but it's kind of like, for what? Like, for what is the point of this? You know what I mean? Like, we're just kind of in the end either giving a team that doesn't deserve a major slot, or making it egregiously difficult for teams to, or egregiously expensive for teams to qualify to the major as it is. So it's kind of like, it's a blessing and a curse in a way.
It's as long as it's short in a way, I would say as well. Like, I don't know. As I completely agree with like your opening point, it was we kind of need to see it happen first before we really truly gauge it. But at the same time, it's like, if it's up to the TO to run the MRQs online or on LAN for especially even for EU, which it's going to be a huge undertaking for any region, and TOs, just to save money, will not do that. Like, it's plenty
100%.
easier to run especially the EU one online, and you would not run it on LAN. When it comes to the other regions, maybe you could see an argument for running them on LAN purely because of the ping problem, but then you have the conversation of it's not competitively fair to have one qualifier going straight to the major on LAN and one qualifier online. It makes no sense. So yeah, it's problematic, I would say. Sure, a bigger major is nice, but again, it's still Swiss into playoffs, isn't it? So
yeah, I think in the ideal situation, the ideal world, and again, we kind of really just have to wait and see how this all plays out. But the ideal world to me, again, leaning towards the Asia angle, but I think this works for any region really, is that you would hope that a local partner can work with Blast, let's say for this next major, and run a LAN tournament locally. And, they obviously have the incentive of doing it because they're a local TO and they want to make it happen through their own means. And Blast has the incentive of, we get a LAN for free, essentially. So let's say a world where Mesa does it for Asia, all the teams congregate in Mongolia, and you have this LAN playoffs. I don't know how their qualifier would work for that necessarily. Maybe you're just inviting the top 2 teams from each region based on VRS. I don't know, whatever. You could do the same for Americas. Maybe you have an Americas LAN run in, somewhere in South America. I'm sure there's no shortage of TOs that would be quite keen to do that if they could find a way to monetize it themselves. And then Blast has to just say, yeah, this is our stamp of approval. We put the Blast qualifier name on it, but that's just all it has to be. And again, Europe's Europe. You have no shortage of fucking betting companies that can probably swing a tournament at the drop of a hat. But I don't know if that's I don't know if that's reasonable. You know what I mean? Like, is that just me in a pipe dream where I'm looking at that and saying this would be awesome if we could have Mesa just pick up the bill and run a qualifier for Blast again. I don't know if it's going to happen, but if these TOs are running their own events anyway, if you're running a Mesa Nomadic Masters in June, or when's the major's in June? Let's say in April. Let's say you're running a Nomadic Masters in April. We were there last year. That event could very easily just be ported into a top 8 Asia-based event, and you have that be the qualifier for the major.
Yeah, it's very, very true, right? I think that's the big thing for me. But I think the way I'm looking at this is that it is Blast is going to be quite telling. I also think there's a world in which this event Oh, sorry. This the way it is now, where we could have it online, we could have it on LAN. Actually, might be a world in which some of these TOs try and like one up each other a little bit. Like, let's say for example, Blast decides to do it online and just kind of just play it, simply and try and not spend too much or whatever. I don't know. We don't know how it's gonna look, but let's say they just go with what it looks like on paper, which is it might just be online, right? And Blast just go with that. There's a world in which whoever ends up taking the second major of the year, rumors are that StarLadder taking the second major of 2025, right? That it will be StarLadder being like, all right, I can one up them. I'll pay for this to be. So I think it's going to be kind of just dependent on the TOs themselves, right? I think some TOs will pick it up, some might not. It is a big undertaking though if you are going to have to do on LAN, and I think obviously the hope is that we do get it right. I mean, as like regardless of whether us three, for example, are working it or not, it is just always better to see it on LAN. I think in every way, because it feels fairer. It feels like there's less asterisks, which is always the issue. Like I feel like whenever we see these like anything online, it's always like the asterisks of but it was online though, so it's like
it's not just that, but it's also the regional split. Like that's the biggest for
exactly.
me. That's the biggest problem. It's like, how do you split the regions fairly? Maybe it's not as big of a deal in Europe because everyone can kind of play everyone, and it's maybe not as big of a deal in NA and North America and South America because you just split the qualification slots evenly there. But like in Asia, particularly because it covers such a large area, like you have to be splitting based on ping.
Exactly.
At which point you're not based on the fairness of the quality of teams. That's the real issue for me.
I mean, for example, when I did ISF and I did all the Asia qualifiers, like it did get split down into like kind of regions, and even then it was very like
always problematic in some way.
Exactly. There's always somebody getting fucked basically, and this is the issue I think here, where then there might be the case of, which again would be kind of annoying, but I can actually see it in a world in which they kind of just do like, right, EU, you guys are going to be online because fucking there's way too many of you, right? You guys are just going to be online. You guys can do your thing. Asia will do a LAN for you guys. America, we might split you into North America, South America, and go from there. And then like, just say like, maybe say, I don't know, with like America, be like, I don't know, even then it's hard because you got like South America and you got Central America as well. So then it's like a little bit funky, but yeah, where they just kind of split it in that sense and just say like North and South America, and basically like somebody gets like fucked, or maybe somebody has to fly somewhere else. It's weird, right? But I think the main thing is Asia. I think Asia, it kind of feels like it has to be a LAN for it to be fair, or somebody's going to get screwed in some way. Like for example, South Africa is like a great example. Like they're going to have to fly to Dubai. Yeah. I'm assuming to play. I mean, they kind of already do play on Dubai servers really anyway. But it's fucked, right? The fact that has to be kind of the way it works out. So it is weird. We would love to see it on LAN. My assumption is that Europe just might not be on LAN. At the same time, though, that might be like seen as a bit of a cop out if we end up getting like, America's and Asia on LAN and then EU isn't. People will be like,
yeah, but the thing is, like, I think if you're a European team and you're not getting one of those, there's 16 invite slots to stage 2 and 3, right? Yeah. You've got no shortage of opportunities to be taking one of those. Whereas if you're a team that's coming through from Asia and potentially like North America is in that same argument now as well, like this is your one real chance to make the major. So you want it to actually be kind of legitimized in that sense. Whereas for the European teams, it's kind of like, well, you have all this shit to play in to get your VRS points up, to get into the top 16, to qualify through to the major through a little bit more of like a natural means, let's just say. So if your qualifier is a little bit funkier, like maybe this is just me again, not being from Europe, so not caring quite as much for the teams beyond the top 16. I think I think the argument is it's a little bit more okay if the qualifier is kind of funkier in that sense, because there's just a lot more opportunities. Whereas if you're from Asia, this is like you have 2 chances in the entire year to have any kind of relevant discussion on the international stage when it comes to Counter-Strike, beyond maybe qualifying for like an ESL Pro League out of ESL Challenger, because everything else is going to be going the way of Mongols and FlyQuest in terms of invite slots. If there's 2 invite slots, it's going Mongols and FlyQuest. There's no conversation about that at this point. Yeah. And there's not that many qualifiers happening in Asia, so you're playing in your domestic tournaments, and that's it.
Qualifiers, full stop. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Kind of interesting. I just saw in the reply to Messiosa's thing, this guy called Shubi has done like a Oster Major that happened today. Who's getting like stage 3, stage 2, etc. There's a few interesting talking points.
It's very interesting.
I think one of which
I like this,
which he's kind of talked about, is Imperial female Navi javelins getting skipped. Now, I think the conversation there is actually what actually happens if we do get, for example, like an Imperial or a Na'vi Javelins playing because
They
like,
won't.
It
just won't
Well, they
happen.
can't though because
but it's a conflict of
is
interest.
it conflict of
It
interest?
has
But
to be.
yeah,
It has to be seen as a conflict of interest. So then it's like let's say there's a world. I don't know how possible it is, but if Imperial female through winning impacts and whatever, and let's say Imperial have a bit of a downtrend, they end up being VRS ranked above them. Do you think
above the main
above,
team,
above the main
above
team,
the
men's
team.
the men's team, right? So is there a world then in which
That would be so.
that would
funny.
be kind of wild, and it's actually a very solid world because Imperial female is so dominant. I mean, well, it's actually getting a little bit closer in the impact scene because Na'vi and Fury,
They are now, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, but, they
check.
are now. Okay, that is kind of
Yeah, that's true. I think they are.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, because the rumors are they're getting the Kato invite as well.
Global Valve ranking. Hang on.
I'm pretty sure they're getting the Kato
Yes,
invite.
they are. 24th Imperial FE. Actual Imperial are 39th.
Wow. Okay, so that is actually quite an interesting thing because then Imperial female would then get an EU spot, but then
they'd in theory get the invite before.
Whoa, no, but then the debate is Imperial female are like what? This is 24th, right? So the 20. I don't know how many like non-EU teams are there, but like Imperial are technically like the 4th or 5th America's region. So then are they?
But listen,
this is a really interesting.
Isn't it still down to the discretion of the org which team you put forth? Because, like, realistically, they're going to put the men's team into the Americas qualifier rather than the women's team into the EU qualifier.
I think so. And I think, obviously, kind of realistically, they'd have a better chance of getting through and getting stickers.
It's down to the org. What they can do is, as Imperial, as an organization, Imperial women will get the invite to EU, and they'll say, no, sorry, we're declining the invite. And then the NA team... the Brazilian team gets invited in Americas. So
that is quite an interesting thing.
That's how I think I'd say it would go.
There's also like, in a way, you can sort of like semi-game the system for Imperial because let's say Imperial, the Brazilians, like, I mean, I don't think it will happen, but they don't get a spot. They'd be like, oh, okay, cool, we'll just take our EU chance through the regional qualifier and see what's what, right? But yeah. This is quite interesting. Obviously, like the APAC stuff's quite interesting too as well because, like, with how things are at the moment, that's fine. There's a few things that I think are not going to happen, like Passion UA being there in the EU qualifier. They're going to lose all their VRS because, well, at the moment it seems like they are because the whole team's like now gone and looks like they're full rebuilding.
Well, they might still have the core.
Exactly.
They might still have the core.
They might still have what Zerafix, Jambo, and Chiller.
Jacasmo.
Oh, Jacasmo, yeah.
Jacasmo.
But who is it? Who is it that's leaving from? Oh no, because Jambo.
Fear.
Yeah, Fear's gone, but Jambo
might not be leaving at this point.
Exactly.
That's what I'm thinking.
Because he was meant to go to Falcons. So I don't know. Who knows? Weird times, but some of those calls might be dead. Like I don't know. Like who knows what's gonna happen? Like Gun 5 and whatever. I mean, they're losing their best player apparently. So
I mean, Cloud9 have disbanded.
True.
Cloud9 have disbanded. Wait, well, who else is in there that have actually gone?
Timberman aren't going to be here.
Sangal don't have a team. Nine Panda still need 2 players. Passion UA they've got the core. Bet Boom might get Boomich and Axile from what I've heard, so that would still mean they have something. That might mean they have to rebuild. What is their team? Do they still have Magnajez, Zorta, and who is it? Who do they have? Magnajez. I'm looking it up.
I try and blank.
Magnajez, Zorta, and someone else. Siren. So you have Magnajez, Siren, Zorta, Boomich, Axel. That's a core that would still exist in the rankings.
Yeah.
So yeah, and actually, very quickly before we go on to the next subject, this kind of just leads me on to one of the things I wanted to mention about like dead teams,
right?
And like, we're like because currently where we're at are in this transition season of every single ESL Challenger League, right? Where we've gone from slots coming from season 48, season 49 is coming, and teams that have made it through from advanced into ECL. And I just wanted to, like, as an example, just talking about Sangal, the current team list for ECL EU has Sangal, who don't have a team. You've got TSM, who are pivoting from the Danish team to a North American team, apparently.
Yes, yeah.
You've got Rush B, who technically have Rush B and Arcred, actually, who technically have teams, but basically only play ECL ever because they don't do anything in any other tournament. They just keep retaining their slot from last season to last season over and over.
Sus as fuck as well. I will
happily
throw it out there.
Monty don't have a team.
Yeah.
Koi don't have a team. and then you've got the teams, of course, who came through advanced, like Navi Junior, Spirit Academy, Cybershock, whatever,
Yeah.
like 500, the Bulgarians. Like, I got an answer to this last night. To backfill slots for ECL, it goes team. This is how things change.
Yeah.
Team, or how it used to be. Teams that were relegated, ESL World Ranking, then teams in advance. But I don't think it ever had to go that far to like pluck teams from like lower ranked positions in the previous season of advanced.
So it has now.
And
Is that what you're saying?
And what I'm saying is now that we're in this transition season between last season slots and now going into VRS slots, like this is a really weird season where I don't think anyone knows, apart from maybe not even ESL themselves, and we're what 2 or 3 weeks away from the season. I'm not necessarily sure anyone knows yet who's actually competing in ECL EU. And maybe some other regions as well.
This is how you end up with shit seasons, though. Like, this is actually kind of a problem. And I think this kind of ties into the whole VRS conversation around the cores and how teams are going to get invited to stuff and this and that.
Yeah.
First of all, I guess let's touch on ECL first. I mean, it's the same thing that happened in Asia, right? Like, Rare Atom, it's like a microcosm of what happened last season, where Rare Atom, they were not allowed to play in season 48 of Asia, and it was like, well, that fucking sucks, because they're at the time, and as we ended up seeing going into the major as well, probably one of the better teams in Asia. And it was like, now instead of them, we've got some random fuck team from fuck knows where that we do not give a shit about, and we watch their games and they just get absolutely blasted. And it's like, first of all, it's a good opportunity for that team, great, but like, first of all, no one's watching Asia as it is. They're certainly not watching Asia when it's a team that you've never even heard of, and then you watch them play and it's like, bro, these guys don't even know how to fucking smoke house on Ancient or Red Room, whatever you want to call it. You know, like, it's like, what are we doing here? Like, yeah, we're quite quote unquote following the letter of the law, but like, we're not getting good results out of that. So something has to change there. That then ties into this VRS conversation around, we need to keep these core threes together, and then you're getting maybe some teams that are dying because of this and built together because of that and whatever. Why are we not having these rankings based on the same way the ESL ranking used to work? Was it was based on the players themselves. The players had the points. So if you would switch from one team to another, you would take your points. You might have, let's say you have 10 points on, you know, again, to use my local, you know, you might have 10 points on the FlyQuest players, right? So you've got Liaz, Dexter, Inns, and Vexa. You've got the core four there. You're changing Alistair out for Regali. You know, you lose 10 points, right? Because Alistair's got the 10 points there. And that makes 50 points total for the team. Now you're down to 40 points, but you've still got points coming through. Regali probably doesn't have many points coming in, but that's fine. Alistair goes over to whatever team he ends up on. He adds plus 10 points to them because he's a player now on that roster. Does that not make more sense than having this core 3 roster situation where you have to keep 3 together? Yeah, I understand you maybe in that theory you're promoting kind of keeping cores together, I guess, and you could argue maybe that's a good thing, but I think it's actually kind of working negatively in a lot of situations. And in the same case for ECL, it's like, yeah, you want to kind of keep some consistency, you kind of want to keep some cores together. That may be true, but at the end of the day, we actually want to have the best teams that we can get, and we're maybe not promoting that as a system right now.
Yeah, I gotta say, just like, ECL has actually been quite an interesting topic. I think for like the last year, I remember, Jordan, we had this conversation in the taxi in Mongolia where I was trying to say that, you know, I've loved ECL, and it's been actually kind of a big part of my career in terms of working these events and working a variety of regions. Right? I've done kind of most regions at this point, I think, bar North America. I think I've done nearly every region in ECL. It's been great for me. It's always fantastic kind of work and consistent work, but you have to look at it in terms of, like, I think for the most part, the formatting is really bad, right? There's no two ways about it. We've got back-to-back best of ones in South America, North America, and Asia, and Oz, I think, as well. Is it the same in Oz?
Yep.
Yeah.
Same in Oz.
That is a dreadful format, right? Like, it just is. There's no two ways about it. It's a terrible idea, right? It should just be a best of 3. I don't know why they even changed off that. I don't even know. I actually, when I saw it happen, I mean, thankfully it didn't happen in the EU, but I can't even fathom why it happened. And then in the EU, what we've got instead, which is like, I don't even think it's even any better. Yeah, we've got best of 3s, which is great. But then we've got this, like,
group stage into 3 brackets.
Insane playoff thing of high tier, mid tier, and low tier, all their own playoffs that kind of trickle down. It is like the most bonkers, or trickle up, I guess, low tier into mid tier into high tier. It's like insane, right? And it doesn't make any sense. I know there's a lot of teams and like it's the format of how it works, but the only issue is like, yes, this might be like justifiable and cool if it was working, but it's just not, because we've got teams which are like either basically dead or like, you know, half the teams are dead. I mean, even, you know, like I don't know if you touched on them, but like Koi have obviously let that team go now.
Yeah,
as of today.
there's a few that actually don't have anyone left. You're gonna have
Yeah, yeah.
TSM, Koi, Monty, and Sangal once the heroic move happens.
Yeah, and then we got teams like, you know, like Apogee, like who knows who's going to be in that team, and then like you already mentioned like the Arc Reds and the Rush Bees, and it's just like a super odd situation that we're in where it's like what is actually achieving this, and then also now as well, it's like, so you get a pro league spot from it, but like it's just an insane thing. Like it was like, I mean, maybe like 3D Max and Amiga, I don't know, whoever wants to debate for that spot, but it's just an insane situation. Like ECL feels like it's like trying to cling on to what it once was, and unfortunately it's just like, I think in every region sort of lost a lot of respect because of how, I mean, how downtrended, and I think, you know, some of it is not even their fault because of how this VRS thing works. It's like it's in a lot of teams like best just not to play it because of one thing. I remember Messioso talking about this, of like why Complexity don't play in North America, because they were saying if we pick up a loss for whatever reason to whatever team, it hurts us. Like we don't gain anything, we just lose VRS ranking. So actually you can't get the best teams now playing ECL anymore, even if they weren't like, you know, if they're completely free. It's in their best interest not to play, to not risk, you know, losing one random best of 3 or one random best of 1. I remember, like, I can't remember who it was. There was one team who just missed out on qualifying to the RMR. Basically,
Might have been 9.
I think it was 9, and they lost one best of 3 in ECL, and it was a completely useless best of 3. It didn't eliminate them for the tournament or whatever. It just knocked them from, like, you know, upper bracket to lower bracket, something like that. And it meant that they lost VRS ranking points off it, and they didn't qualify to the RMR. Like, it's insane stuff like that, right? And I think this is the issue that ECL have now got. It actually works against a lot of teams to play it, which is the annoying thing. For like teams that are like advanced level teams or academy teams, it's great, but this is an academy league. Or teams like Rush B and Arc Red, who don't play, well, Arc Red do a little bit, but Rush B don't play any other tournaments. They only play ECL. Like, what is even the point? Like, it's such an odd thing now. So like, I think ECL need a huge overhaul. I think I'd be so surprised if they don't know this. I think they've known that they've needed an overhaul for a while. In every region.
I don't know, bro. I think they're just clinging on to it to have something. You know what I mean? Like, this is the actual issue is that, I mean, everything that you're saying about EU may be true, but then on the flip side of that, it's actually the premier tournament in Asia. Like, it is the best tournament that you can play in Asia. So it's like, you almost can't have the same setup. And I think the problem is that they want to have something kind of uniform. They want to have it be easy to run. Obviously, as we know, it's all done by the same broadcaster as well, regardless of which region you're doing. And look, I understand why they're doing that. Obviously, it's a costing thing. Nat Champs was very expensive for what they got out of it. But at the end of the day, I think it does need to sort of be run somewhat domestically by each region, because each region has different needs and different wants. And, you know, you're not necessarily getting this great understanding of each region, I think, when you're just running it holistically from like a global perspective, right? I don't even know who is in charge of ESL Challenger League, but I assume it's, you know, somebody over in Europe or whatever. And it's like you can look at it and say, we're going to run this in Asia, but like you're probably not boots on the ground looking at it from the Asia perspective and thinking, okay, this is actually the top tournament that we've got. You're thinking about it from the perspective of a European perspective, like you guys, where it's like, oh, this is a tier 2 tournament. It's going to be fine if we have this and this. But for us in Asia, like, we want this to be our premier tournament, you know what I mean? And the fact that it's just 2 best of 1s and you don't have half the teams playing because of this and this, it's like, it's a problem, man. Like, and it's exactly as you say, Neil. Like, I think it has lost a lot of prestige, and it's not. I just, you know, I don't want it to end. There's no, especially in Oceania and Asia, because it's literally the two, like that's the only like long form league that exists in those regions at the moment. Everything else is either like an ODC or at least, you know, like a shorter form thing. Or in the case of Oceania, there's like literally nothing else. Like ESL Challenge League is pretty much the only thing you can play if you're an Oceanic team. So I don't want it to end, but I think something does definitely need to change with it, because like the longer this goes on, the more people are going to go, no one gives a fuck about this. It's bad to watch. It's bad to, frankly, it's bad to work. you know, ESL looks at it, goes, we're getting bad viewership. No one seems to care about this. We'll just kill it. And it's like that, then everybody loses. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
put it back into the hands of the people who do actually care about it. Back when we had ANZ champs, and it's the same probably for you guys with the UK Premiership or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Like ANZ champs was 10 times the product that ESL Challenger was. And when they killed ANZ champs, they're like, we're going to replace it with ESL Challenger League, and it's going to be they said it's going to be a like for like product. It's going to be an equally as good product. And you can look at it now 12 months later, and there's no world. There's no world where it's a like-for-like product. I'm sorry.
And this is the thing, like, when we speak about it, like, it is, like, from a place of love for us, because we've all, it's been a big part of our careers, right? So, like, like, you know, we speak about this in a negative sense because we want it to be good, because it is actually a large portion of our work. You know, I'll hold my hands up. It's a completely selfish mindset in the sense of, like, we all work this a lot, and we want the product that we work to be good, and this is the issue.
It's just, if you're going to have it, if you're going to have it, why are you like, no, I don't even know. I don't even know if it's fair to say that they're half-assing it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure there's someone who's working really hard on ESL Challenger League internally in ESL, but it's like, it's not producing good outcomes. Like, we can do it better. Let's make it best of threes. It's MR12 now. The games are going pretty quick, and a lot of the matches in ESL Challenger League, at least the ones that I do in Oceania and Asia, go pretty quickly anyway. So let's at least just have them be BO3s. You know, like, it's fucking FlyQuest versus. It's probably something, you know, like Arcade Esports. You guys ever heard of Arcade Esports? Probably not if you haven't been casting ESL Challenge League Oceania. That's a 2-0 every day of the week. But at least you're playing a best of 3 now for all the other matches. So
against the best team in the region.
You know, you can at least say, okay, there's some value in this, right? Like, but right now it's like 2 best of 1s. We saw situations in the last season of Challenger League where like Rooster ended up, you know, 5th place because they lost like some BO1s, like 13-11. And it's like, if that's a BO3, they win that series, we get a better playoffs, we get a better tournament, we get a better everything, right? But the way it is right now, it's like, you know, I just don't think I don't think anybody is winning. Like, I don't think ESL's winning. I don't think we as the talent are winning. I don't think the players are winning. I don't think the viewers are winning. Like, so what are we doing this for? Like, can we not just find a way to make it good for at least somebody?
The best ones in particular is always the thing I've never. I fully do not get it. Like, it's been the biggest debate of, like, not even debate. Like, the biggest thing. Like, even still in the new major format, we still have best of 1s kickstarting it. Everyone dislikes it. Nobody is a fan of best of 1s. Not an MR12 anymore. I don't understand why it's still a thing in ESL, but there's like so many issues that crop up. Like, okay, let's say this tournament is a little bit like whatever. No one really cares that much, but the people who are viewing
doesn't have to be.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But the people who are viewing it are, let's say, which is a lot of like tier 2 online is betters, right? How do betters win when the game ends up being 1-1, right? Or do you have to bet on the individual best of 1?
I think you're pretty uneducated on betting there. I've had some conversations with you where you are pretty egregiously uneducated when it comes to betting, which is probably a good thing, mate.
I've never bet.
That's a tick in your book. That's a tick in your book. There's a lot of things you can bet on.
Yeah, I've only
There's a lot of things
in my life when I was like, I don't know, I was like 19 or something. I bet on an FA Cup match. It's like I put like 8 on. I lost £5. I was like, this is fucking stupid. Never again. So I don't really understand how the betting thing works, but even still, like, it's like, you know, they're a large portion of viewers, right? And that must be kind of frustrating for them. You're betting on like individual best of 1s.
Nah, you're betting on score lines, basically. You're betting on like, can this team make more than like 8 rounds or something like that?
Oh, you're betting on who wins.
You're not betting necessarily on who wins. You're betting on, like in my example, FlyQuest versus FlyQuest versus Arcade. Can Arcade get more than 6 rounds? You bet on that. So that's the thing that you bet on. But I don't even think it's necessarily the betters. I mean, I think there are people that are literally there are people that are interested in these things, okay? Like, there are people that will watch Asia CS, you know, and just give them a decent enough product to watch and they'll fucking watch it.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's like, for us, it's always been like a labor of love.
Also put it on HLTV.
Yeah, oh yeah, Asia needs to go on HLTV, especially because it actually affected like
a lot. It affected a lot,
a lot, right? So like, it is like an issue. But yeah, ultimately this comes from a place of love, right? We want this product to be good, and unfortunately it's not going to be good. And like, you know, I'm doing quite a bit of EU heading in towards this year, and like, I can't say I'm like looking forward to it, because like, all the teams that at least were a little bit exciting are now kind of dead. It's like Movistar, at least a competitive team, and are no longer a team. TSM at Danish roster was like, it was okay. It wasn't bad to watch. It's much better. I'd much rather watch them than like a Rush B or an Arc Red or like, you know, fucking Apogee. You know what I mean? Like Baltic Apogee or whatever the fuck.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, at least it's something. But then they're all dying now. So it's like, it's gonna be, I don't know, it's gonna be like
But
a drag.
even now, right? Because we're like, enjoyers of all Counter-Strike of all levels. Like even now, looking at the season, it's actually like it won't even be a bad. I have some interesting things. Like you're gonna have Paravision with this new team that could have Jame in it because they've still got the core. You talk about teams here that still have the core that can probably still retain their slot, right? Paravision might have Jame involved. Nine Pandas are going to have 2 new players to see. Sashi are going to have Zyphon. Aurora are going to have Patsy. Bait obviously going to be playing with Kenzazor. Sinners need a +2. That has yet to be decided. Like, there's actually like that's 4 or 5, and you've got Saw with a new player. 3D Max is going to have the same team. The Amiga going to have the same team likely. That's actually like a solid group of like 6 or 7 good tier 2 teams that actually will provide like decent entertainment as a product in ESL's main and only tier 2 product.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just as I was kind of started off the conversation, it's the transition season between what it is now and what it has been into using VRS. They might even have to, because of all the teams we mentioned that are dead, like TSM, Sangal, whatever, they might actually even have forced to use VRS to like backlog some teams into the league at this point, because they might need to fill slots. It's as simple as that. So, there was some. Don't forget, by the way, I mentioned those teams that have these new additions that are cool and fun to watch. You're going to have Navi Junior and Spirit Academy, probably the 2 most exciting teams, not even academies, exciting teams in Tier 2 toward the end of 2024, with Makaze on Navi Junior and the obvious Kyosuke on Spirit Academy, involved with these like upper, more known Tier 2 teams. That's super exciting. Like, I think that's a really cool product to have there. You can see maybe these teams go up against each other in like CCT playoffs, sure, but that's just CCT series after CCT series. This leads into Pro League, and sure, Navi Junior
this
and
matters.
Sure, Navi Junior and Spirit Academy, neither of them are going to Pro League unless they decide they want to put them in Pro League and the top team pulls out. Not going to happen unless Spirit decide to do that. Spirit have done that in the past. Navi have never. But, like, that's not going to happen for them. But for the other teams, seeing how they perform against them is super fascinating with, a Pro League spot on the line. And as we said, things are going to change when it all turns into VRS, and maybe they call ECL a qualifier instead. Like, that may be the route we're going to.
One thing I will say that will save things, at least for my books, if all the regions had LANs, the way Asia had a LAN at the end for the playoffs, that would change things. And especially now that challengers are dead, or assuming they're dead, rumors are they are dead. I think it's confirmed. I don't think it's rumors.
Well, nothing's announced at this point, so if it's not announced now, I don't think it's happened.
I think got 3 months to announce a tier 2 event.
I think it's basically confirmed that it is like dead, right? So. So the challenger lands are dead, which is unfortunate because they were obviously great for the tier 2 scene, but financially speaking, it doesn't make any sense for yourself.
At the end of the day, they were Pro League qualifiers too.
Exactly, right? So this is now where it's like, at least this would like save face a little bit because it would feel like it has something behind it, but fucking is what it is, right? Done that. Final topic we can touch on before we finish. First tournament of the year, Blast Bounty. Now, this, I gotta say, is actually a really cool tournament. I gotta say, I think this is one of the more interesting formats. I want to see if I can actually get the what's it called, the bounty. Here you go. It can get like, there's like a rundown somewhere where it talks about like how it all works monetarily speaking. But essentially, this is a really cool change up in format with the finances.
Especially to kick off the year.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously, all the big teams playing, which is sick. Especially because a lot of these obviously are making changes, which is obviously really awesome. See how kind of they fare pretty early in. A lot of them actually probably wouldn't have had like that much prac. But the big thing is actually talking about how the format itself is interesting. Like certain players or certain teams have a bounty put on their head. You beat them, you get more money, yada yada, which all helps with VRS ranking. So like every game actually kind of matters. So I'm looking forward to this one. I think it's gonna be cool. I think it's gonna be quite a. There's going to be a lot more onus on upsets, for example, because of this whole bounty on certain players and certain teams kind of head and all the rest. And especially with all these teams making changes, I think this could be quite an interesting tournament, especially to kickstart the year. Everyone's sort of tentatively waiting to see what 2025 is going to be looking like. Where I would say as talent, as commentators, we're cautiously optimistic. I think is that a good way to put it, fellas? There's a lot of tournaments going on. generally speaking,
Yeah.
a lot of tournaments means overlap. Overlap means more work, right? I think it's kind of like just the
In theory.
general. Yeah, exactly.
In theory.
Execution not always the same level, but you get the gist, right? But the cool thing is, as a tournament to kickstart things, where there is this sort of like, I don't know, like tentative, like waiting in the air. I think this is quite kind of an awesome one. It's a little bit goofy, but like in a good way goofy. I think it's going to be cool, interesting to take a look at. I'm a fan of it. I actually also have like, massive kind of shout out to Blast. This is a quite an ingenious format and it is different. And I like seeing something a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, the format notwithstanding, I'm not even necessarily going to comment on that because I'm not really a format guy. I just think it's a cool kind of a concept to start the year off with. Basically, what is it's a 32 team tournament, right? And you pretty much got anyone who's anyone. Like you got pretty much every team that you would kind of want. Just to start off the year, really, really early on in the year, and I think that's super awesome, right? It's going to give us a lot of answers to a lot of the questions that we've been having. Obviously, it means that a lot of these like roster changes have to kind of be locked in. We'll get to see, what those teams are going to be looking like, how they're going to start the year, and it kind of just, it gets the year going pretty nicely. Yeah. So I'm pretty happy to kind of see this so early on in the year. The only thing I am a bit sad about is the fact that it clashes with Extreme Stand, which means that unfortunately Mongols will not go to Extreme Stand. Instead, they'll be in Europe playing in Blast Bounty. But apart from that, I think it's pretty sick.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this because not just to start off a year as well. Like we're straight into the the 2025 era of Counter-Strike, which which we've spoken about for so long. We've got straight away. We're into the Valve ranking format of inviting these teams straight up. And we're into the format of we're into sort of a situation, obviously, as well of seeing all these new players and new signings have to deliver pretty much immediately, right? You're gonna have likely Phaser Liege. You're gonna have one we actually haven't spoken about at all, actually, which maybe we'll touch on just after this point I've made. G2 Heavy God is likely.
True.
We've got whatever Heroic put together. We've got Eternal Fire Jota. I made a list of a future video that I'm going to do. Bait Kenzazor, Fluxo Peria Jr., who's a pretty talented young Brazilian player. FlyQuest Regali, Saw SHR, who's another young Portuguese player who Saw brought up despite Saw doing crazy transfer decisions and benching decisions, whatever. It's an interesting player to bring up. You've got who are Liquid going to pick up? Who are Nine Pandas going to pick up? Who are Big going to pick up? We've discussed that a little bit. Possibility of Pain Davideus is really cool. Like, there are so many question marks here. And we're going to get answers to them, at least in the early stage of their sort of roster trajectory in the scene, very quickly. And that's what's super exciting. And one actually I think is important to touch on too is the fact that we actually get to see ENTs in an event like this because they haven't been playing anything relevant at all because they didn't get into the major cycle and they completely rebuilt to eventually win Espo. So this is the first time we're going to see them in an event like this and actually see if they can sort of repeat something from that Espo form.
It's true. I actually like what I saw from ENT as well. I think it's a cool team. I think there's a lot to like with the signings they made of Natu and Kaspersky, and I think they obviously looked very, very good with that big upset on, I guess, quote unquote home soil as well. So yeah, I'm with you. I think it's cool. Also, I mean, it's probably worth just talking about because it was kind of the big talking point with this tournament as a whole is that, this is actually where, due to VRS ranking, Imperial Female are going to get a run out and might also, the rumors are also be playing Kato play-ins as well. I'm not 100% sure on that one. I don't know if that's been confirmed yet, but I think the rumor
is... Not confirmed, but I think that's pretty much...
I think pretty much...
People have calculated it.
Yeah, because like there can't really be that much movement. And there is also one of the team yet to be confirmed as the wildcard invite as well. Obviously, Falcons have got one of them. There's another one, which I don't actually know who's going to be. Maybe Nip. I don't know. Who knows?
Who knows?
But there's another team. But yeah, Imperial Female going to be playing. I think, there was obviously a lot of talking about this, but I think, generally speaking, it is all round a good thing. I don't think there is actually that much of a, I think a lot of people like to kind of harp on the negative side of this, but I think, the people who don't see this as like a good thing that Imperial Female are playing, first of all, they're there because of the ranking, right? This, if it ends up being bad and, they kind of get beat or whatever, it resets the rankings. I don't really understand why people complain about it that much, but I'm actually really quite positively looking forward to seeing actually how they play, because first of all, the way this system works and the thing, they get to pick their opponent, so they can actually, they could pick one of the weaker teams, and I kind of get the system there, or they could just punch up and go for one of the heavy hitters and be like, yeah,
Yeah,
fuck it, like,
no.
like Spirit, let's go, man. Like, you know what I mean? Which could be sick. But I'm interested to see how they actually fare up, because within the Impact scene, they are unbelievably good, right? They're yet to lose. Right? Have they lost the LAN tournament? I haven't followed that closely in a while.
I don't think they've lost a LAN. They have
Yeah.
lost like other tournaments,
games,
I think.
right? I'm trying to
And they've lost games. I think like it was Navi Javelins and I think Fury
yeah.
FE, who were like two of the biggest
actually,
competitors
no,
to them.
they did play a LAN. I remember this. They played a LAN in
sorry,
Brazil.
yeah. They haven't lost
Fury.
an ESL LAN.
Yes,
they haven't lost
they haven't lost an
LAN.
Impact, but they lost a Reinhas do Clutch Fergie. They lost whatever that is, right? To Furia, which, in all fairness, is actually also, you know, it's its own separate topic. It's kind of sick to see there's now like Fury and Navi Javelins all actually being quite competitive with Imperial at the top. But yeah, they haven't lost an ESL LAN with the Impact LAN, which is, I'm interested to see actually now how they fare, because obviously when they're in their own kind of circuit in itself, we actually don't know really how they actually fare up. Even kind of more so against like the top level kind of tier 2 opposition. I'm talking teams like your kind of Namigas and your Nine Pandas, your Bates. I mean, who knows with Sangar, what's going to be going on with them. But you know what I mean, right? Like how they kind of fare up. So I'm looking forward to it. It actually is going to be obviously a big litmus test for them, a big step up. They have had a couple of tournaments where they played, it's like CCT, I think they played a few online.
This is kind of my thought process with it, right? Like, I think it can be looked at in two ways, of it being a win-win and a lose-lose. If you look at it as a win-win, like everyone is expecting them to go into this event, whoever they pick, everyone is expecting Imperial FE to get 13-3, 13-5, something like that. Nearly every single best of 3. If you do anything better than that, maybe push it to like, you know, a 13-10 a map, maybe even an overtime if you're really lucky. Like, that's a huge positive for women's Counter-Strike. Like, I think getting close in any map in a professional setting against a men's team, it would be a massive positive. And that's where I see it as a win-win. Like, there's nothing to lose for them. Pick an opponent, prep super, super hard for the one opponent you pick, go full anti-strat, try absolutely everything to get the best out of your players in that one particular game, see what happens, and you can say, listen, ladies, we've done our absolute best here. Let's see what we can do. If you look at it as a lose-lose, unfortunately, there are always going to be people who will say things, and if a men's team even struggles slightly against Imperial FE, they'll say, oh, they were throwing rounds, oh, they were match fixing, blah, blah. Especially if it's like a middling tier 2, like CIS team, right? So that's a problem where people are going to have that poor attitude towards it. But as I agree with you, Neo, I think it's a win-win. The fact that they're there from how much they've grinded the women's circuit is fair enough. You can't argue with it, even though people will still argue with it. Give them a chance, and as you rightly said, Neo, if they fail badly and continue to get invited and continue to fail badly, the ranking will eventually reflect that, and they won't get invited anymore.
Yeah, just one quick
invited
thing
anymore. So
that I actually remember. I remember speaking to a friend about this. The one thing I am a little bit worried about is just if they go to the tournament, pick their opponent, and then do get battered. There's a world in which it just fuels the fire for like, you know, like a lot of this like just like negative rhetoric that we kind of see. Because the ultimate thing is like with the Impact scene, it has its arguments, but we want to see the Impact scene be able to at least compete in some way, right? And this is going to be that kind of true test. Now, whether it's a little bit early for that, who knows? But I think, the issue for me is that if they do go and then lose and quite badly, it can fuel the fire a little bit, which would just be fucking annoying. You know what I mean? Like we just get to see this on Twitter for ages. But I'm hoping they can go and actually show a performance. Like you said, pick an opponent. If my understanding's right, they get to pick whoever they want. Like, you know, pick like a Nine Pandas.
No, I think I think Fragar said something about that. They are 9th out of 16 to pick, however, so they have limited options. I think.
Oh, they're 9th out of 6. Oh, okay. So I thought they were going to be one of the first picks. Okay, they're not. Okay, that will change things a little bit. But even still, I thought they were going to be one of the first picks because they're one of the lower ranked. Well, they are the lowest ranked, I think, right? Is that right? Oh no, the lowest ranked on
HLTV ranking,
but they're 24th actually in VRS. So it's different there. Either way, they don't get to pick first. Okay, I thought they were going to get to pick first. then like you said, you could pick first and you could just like full like hard prep and then like, you know, give it a good run out. But anyway, Jordan, what are your thoughts on this one?
I mean, I think you guys have pretty much wrapped it up. I don't know that there's too much necessarily to say. I mean, I'm obviously someone that's quite for representation in Counter Strike, just purely being from a minor region, so I can't go on on the record and say I think Asia needs more opportunities and representation and this and that, and then turn around and say I don't think a female team deserves to play at a tier 1 event. Obviously, the circumstances through which they make it, I think, do come into some degree of question. I think that there's definitely something that needs to be looked at going into 2025 in that respect, but they're here. They've qualified through the means that have been outlined to them. I don't really begrudge them for accepting the invite or anything like that.
Yeah.
So, I wish them the best. Hope they do well. Hope they can prove that they do deserve to be sitting there in number 24. And in a month's time, we'll be talking a completely different tune and saying maybe there's some real talent coming through from the female scene, and it was all worth it, and it was all the investment into that has really paid off. But we'll just have to wait and see, I think, really is the main thing. And at the end of the day, like, again, it's the same conversation that we would have around Asia. Mongols doesn't exist if there isn't things for them to play in, to be bad in for years until they get good. And eventually now they're, let's say, a top 10 team in the world pretty comfortably. And, maybe it takes another 3 or 4 years for the women's scene to kind of do the same. But, that's fine. It takes that time. And I think that's the reason why we have that. And we want to have women in our scene. We want to have Asians in our scene. We want to have Australians in our scene. We want to have Indians in our scene. We want to have everybody in our scene. And I think that it's cool that people get these opportunities, even if it is few and far between. You do only, you need those slight little opportunities to kind of get the ball rolling. And eventually that snowballs into something. Not for every team, but for some teams. And for the some teams, then I think that's what people really, love to see. They love to root for an underdog. So, let's go.
There we go. Yeah, I'll be rooting. It'll be interesting. I think it'll be a watched match for multiple reasons, but I think it's going to be a very good test, and also kind of the first true test of this VRS system. I think is the main thing for us. Is like really looking at how effective VRS is, not just specifically for Imperial Female, but for everybody, right? Like, is it effective? Is it the right way to go about this? Is money alone enough? And then how do we differentiate what prize pool is good prize pool in a sense?
Well, they're going to come thick and fast, aren't they, with the schedule of the year? So
exactly.
we're gonna find out relatively quickly, I think, what things need to be changed. And to be fair, Valve continue to tweak things nearly all the time. They have 2 or 3 people in charge of looking at it nearly all the time, I'm pretty certain. So it's like, honestly, the changes they make are always questioned by lots of people and by the entire scene. And some people like them, some people hate them. But reality dictates here is that if there's something glaringly wrong, I think we'll see it pretty quickly over the course of the first 3 months of the year.
I think you're right. We can kind of start to round things off there, unless anyone else has anything to touch on. But
I guess one big one we hadn't spoken about, possibility of G2 Heavy God. You want to do 2 minutes on that quickly?
Yeah, why not? G2 Heavy God. It is actually. I would say I don't mind it. I think for me, Heavy God's been a player that I've always kind of liked. Obviously with Cloud9, I mean, God knows what's happening with Cloud9. They just kind of completely died, right? And
they've disbanded. Yeah,
and first of all, I don't know why. I don't think that team was terrible. By any means, Icy's obviously gone to VP as well, and then the rest of them are kind of just the rest of them are kind of just dead. But I don't know. I think Heavy God obviously deserves his chance to play in a top team. Now, God is quite a step up. You've gone from being in an okay tier 1 team to a top level, team. The number 1 ranked in the world on HSTV. You know what I mean? This is the top team in the world, kind of currently ranking wise, playing with arguably the best player in the world, right? So yeah, it is a very interesting sort of position to be in, and I think the thing with me is that for Heavy God, it's going to be a big step up. But the good thing is he's not just going straight into Nico's roles. Malbs take Nico's roles. He takes Malbs' roles. I think it's a pretty decent person. I think he can play at that level. So I'm a fan of it. I have no qualms against it. And also, again, it kind of goes back to this thing of at the moment, really, who else can G2 kind of pick up?
Yeah. If it's the only change that G2 makes, I think they're still going to be a good team. I think it's, again, one of those moves that you're obviously forced into by Nico leaving. There's never going to be an upgrade necessarily that you're going to be able to get there. So you just sort of take what you can get. And I think what they've got is not necessarily bad at all. It's somewhat similar in that conversation to the Falcons. where they've
Yeah.
gone, well, we kind of have to do something, right? We have to get this this heroic core. It's the best we can get. It's actually pretty good in the end. Maybe it's not what we want. Maybe we do still obviously want Nico if we could have him, but we can't. So let's find something. And pretty good option in Heavy God. I'm pretty keen to see how it plays out. So no complaints from me necessarily. But again, one of those situations where you really do just sort of have to wait and see. Like you can never know in these kinds of things how it's exactly going to go, but on paper seems like not a bad shout.
Yeah, it's like the best, as you say again. It's like best possible option, and a lot of these teams, as we've been speaking about with Falcons and stuff. A lot of these choices that they've made feel like stopgap options to claim a core or whatever. The G2 one and the Phase one definitely. The Phase Vitality and G2 moves, I think, all feel like moves that they're actually like pretty happy with in a way, and they don't feel like stopgap moves at all. And I think that Heavy God maybe might be considered the sort of third place of those three between Rupture Vitality and Unleash Phase if they come to pass.
Yeah.
But I still think it's in the conversation of a move that G2 won't be unhappy with, especially if he performs. And listen, it's still question marks whether, as you say, he can do it at the top level. But the choices available of the riflers that they had, of ones that actually perform, and don't forget, that Cloud9 team wasn't exactly, beautifully, I guess you could say, run in a way. It had many issues in terms of, even though Bimich is a good IGL, I still think there are many question marks about how it played out on the server, and he was still performing really well. So that's a positive. And stuff like that can always be interesting when a team blows up, like Cloud9 completely disbands. You get players going everywhere, and with the possibility of Boomich and Axar going to Bet Boom, that's a whole new sort of start for the likes of Zorta. Paravision, as we've touched on, maybe picking up Jame. I think it's just these options of these players that were playing at the top level now dropping down a little bit, and some players that were playing at that level now going up to the very top. It just adds so many conversation points for the year, and I think that's what makes it exciting.
Alrighty, well, we can kind of get to the end of wrapping things up. I just want to finish things off in this episode. Just look at a calendar, a pretty busy calendar, and this is only including top lands as well. But this is going to be, there's going to be probably a few tier 2 or lower lands kind of dotted in there, but it is going to be packed. I mean, May is jam-packed. April pretty busy. November, September, all very busy as well. There's a hell of a lot going on in the Counter-Strike world. Of course, this month we got the Kato play-ins and we got the Blast Bounty, as we kind of just spoken about, but it very quickly, starts getting going from like early Feb. Kato straight into the first PGL tournament. Sky Sports have got their souvenir thing, which is kind of like the bounty system for them. It's like their tier 1.5 more than the like main event, if I'm right in saying, because I suppose Masters is their like main one.
Masters and Champions are their main products,
Yeah.
but look, I don't know. Sky Sports is just they've had a couple of tournaments that they've already cancelled last year, right? So I'm just.
True.
I don't know. I'd sort of take it with a grain of salt. You look at looking at that page. It's like there's not that much information on it. There's no really teams that are like locked in. It's like
or
locations to be advised. So I'll take it with a grain of salt. I'd love to see it, obviously, again, because I worked with Sky Esports last year, and the event, even though it was under some scrutiny, I think they kind of got it. Once they got it going, it was okay. Same kind of thing as the Mesa RMR, these Asia TOs in particular, I think you kind of need to give them a little bit of time, right? It's very hard to actually run a really good CS tournament if you've never done it before. So I would like to see them exist in 2025. I've just got my, I'm not holding my breath, let's just say.
Yeah, fair enough. But the good news is there's actually a lot of tiers. Like I said, this is just tier 1, but we got Blast, ESL, so IM and EPL, Sky Esports, Yala. What else we got? Star Ladder, obviously. As well. Yeah, Fissure. I've got whatever they're going to run. EWC, Thunderpick at some point, CAC as well. And I think that's kind of all of them. Yeah, so yeah, there's there's a good selection there, and there probably will be the fair decent amount of tier 1.5, tier 2 tournaments that might crop up. We might see the likes of, like you said, like a Mess, obviously, Extremes land for you, Jordan. The tournaments like this where it's slightly smaller, but still land. So yeah, it's cool. It's going to be a very busy year. I think everybody's kind of holding bated breaths in terms of how it's going to play out, but ultimately should be quite exciting, I think, is the main thing. But Without further ado, I think we can end it on that one. Jordan, thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to have you on. It's been a long episode, but a lot to talk about over a very busy Rostermania. A nice way to wake you up this morning as well. Off the back of
Yeah, I mean, I got up at 6:30. It's now 9:30. Sunday's ready to get rolling, so
exactly.
I'm keen for a big brekkie and yeah, good day.
Yeah, get cracking. Exactly that. Well, for now, we're going to leave it at that. You can kind of catch us all here, there, and everywhere. But kind of for the next month, for most of the part, not a huge amount going on. Of course, Jordan, you're going to be out at Extremes Land, which should be cool. Myself and Trav are probably going to be just grinding out a bit of the content. You know how it is. But yeah, thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to have you on, and everyone for joining us in the chat. If you watch this on Twitch, we also put it on YouTube. If you watch it on YouTube, we put it on Twitch. You know how it is. Vice versa. The Twitch episodes come up, obviously, the day before the YouTube ones. So if you're watching it on Twitch, go to YouTube and vice versa. All the boys' links will be down below as well. You can see them on your screen right now, but they will be in the description, so go and check out the fellas. But thank you for joining us. Without further ado, see you next one.